He woke up in a stranger's body beneath a yellow sky, with golden letters above his head. The legendary farmer. The crowd laughed at him, not out of malice, but out of pity. Worse than malice. None of them knew that this farmer remembered things about the earth that no one in this world knew. The first thing he felt was dryness, in his throat, on his lips, under his back. The ground burns like a red-hot stone. He opens his eyes and sees a foreign sky, yellow, faded like old paper forgotten in the sun. Above his head, golden letters in a language he doesn't know are burning out, but the meaning comes on its own, as if someone had planted the translation right in his brain. The legendary farmer. Someone snorts, then laughter rolls around in a circle like a stone down a mountain. Dirty faces, bare feet, canvas shirts. A small woman with calloused hands falls to her knees beside him. She presses his head to her knees. Her tears drip onto his forehead. She whispers that everything will be all right, that you can make a living as a farmer too. He lies there and feels a stranger's body, skinny, weak, shivering from hunger. And at the same time, he feels his memory, clear as a blueprint. He turns his head and inhales the earth. Sour. pH 4.5, maybe lower. Clay mixed with sand, no drainage. A tuft of pigweed sticks out of a crack. That means the groundwater is close. Behind the people's backs, he sees an abandoned canal, dry, overgrown, 10 years without maintenance. And these people are laughing at the farmer. The memory of the former owner gives him bits and pieces. A name, Han Doyun, a village, Pumpkin Ford. His mother is a widow. His father died 3 years ago of a fever. His wife, So-rin, a quiet girl with dark eyes, stands slightly to the side and doesn't laugh. She just watches, and there is fear in her gaze, not for herself, for him. He sits down. His head is spinning. He wipes his mother's tears and speaks softly. "Mom, don't cry. I know what to do." She freezes. Something in his voice is unfamiliar. She can feel it. In the center, an old man with a pipe shakes his head. Elder Pak Chong-soo. He spits and says the gods have become completely brazen. First they took the rain, then the harvest. Now they've given the boy the most useless class of all. He's seen legendary swordsmen. He's heard of mages. But a legendary farmer is a golden shovel. It shines, but it's too ashamed to dig. The crowd roars with laughter. Do-yun stands up. His legs are unsteady. He looks around the village. 24 mud houses with leaky roofs. Behind them, barren fields, gray, cracked. Not a single patch of green as far as the eye can see. 3 children sit in the shadow of a wall, swollen bellies, thin arms. One is chewing on bark. Do-yun knows this look. Protein starvation. Another month and the swelling will set in. Then blindness. Then death. He crouches down and places his palm on the dry bark, and the world changes. A translucent panel flashes before his eyes. Only he can see it. Soil composition, pH 4.1, high salinity, dead mana in a layer beneath the topsoil, nitrogen critically low, potassium 0. He removes his hand. The panel goes dark. He places it there again. It flashes. That's his class. Not fiery swords, not icy spears, soil analysis. He laughs quietly. Someone shouts that the farmer has already set off. Do-yun isn't listening. He walks along the field, touching the ground every 10 steps. He reads it like a book, page by page. An hour later, he knows everything. 4 fields are dead, but not hopeless. Dead mana lies in a layer and prevents roots from growing down. Break through that layer. Draw out the mana through the right crops. Add alkali and organic matter, and the earth will bear fruit. He approaches the elder and asks for a field. Anyone. The worst one. The one everyone has given up on. Park Jong-soo looks at him for a long time. Then he says there's a patch on the outskirts where not even a weed has grown in 10 years. Let the farmer make a fool of himself there. At least it'll have a good laugh. Do-yun nods and goes home. His home is a mud hut barely 2 steps wide. So-rin is sitting on the threshold. She stands up. She doesn't hug him. She silently lets him inside. He looks into her face. Dark eyes, sharp cheekbones. Beautiful in a way you don't notice right away. The old Doyun loved her in silence. The new one says he needs her help tomorrow. She blinks. In 2 years of marriage, her husband has never once asked for help. She nods. At night, he lies on a mat and counts. 120 people, children, 60 working hands. How much rice is needed to make it through the winter? It's just enough. No reserves. And if things don't go perfectly, a third of the village won't survive until spring. So-rin is awake beside him, listening, waiting. He gets up before dawn. So-rin is already up with a bundle. In the bundle is a bark flatbread, bitter, tough. He finishes it in silence and goes to the field. Dead earth, gray, caked into a crust. He needs 3 things: lye to raise the pH, organic matter to kickstart life, and a green manure crop to pierce the manna layer with its roots and pull the poison upward. There's no lime, but there is wood ash, organic matter from rice husks, and rusty iron to bind the excess manna. He saw it on the panel. Manna breaks down from iron oxide. There was a chapter on phytoremediation in his sophomore textbook. Plants pull toxins out of the soil. Here, instead of toxins, it's manna. The principle is the same. First, he goes to the blacksmith. In a dark, dilapidated smithy, a girl stands by the anvil. Small, wiry, covered in soot from head to toe. Yun Mei, the last of a line that once forged swords for kings. Now she repairs shovels for a bowl of porridge. He asks for a piece of old iron. The rustier, the better. She stares at him with the eyes of a wild cat. She says that metal here is worth its weight in silver, and she won't give it to a guy with the most disgraceful class in history. He doesn't argue. He says that in a month he'll need a real blacksmith for a job that no one in this world has ever done. And he'll pay with rice. Fresh, from the field he'll harvest this month. She smirks. She says he's either a madman or a genius, and she tosses him a shard of a rusty blade. Perfect. Then he goes to the herbalist. Li Na is sitting at a table, grinding something in a mortar. Tall, slender, an apron with dozens of pockets, a cold gaze. She's already heard about yesterday. He asks for wormwood and wood ash. She asks why. He says he'll revive the dead field on the outskirts. She laughs. She says 3 alchemists from the capital came and couldn't do it. He replies calmly, the alchemists poured elixirs from above. But the problem is below, beneath the top layer. She stops laughing. She's been digging up roots for 20 years and knows what soil layers of soil. What he says sounds crazy, but there's logic to it. She gives him wormwood and ashes, and says that if he fails, she won't treat him for free. The third is So-rin. He comes home and asks for rice husks from her dowry chest. She freezes. That chest is all that's left of her mother, a handful of useless husks at the bottom. But it's meaningful. She opens the chest, takes out a handful, hands it over. Doesn't ask why. He looks her in the eyes and says he'll return 10 times as much. She shakes her head. She says she wants only one thing, for him to come back alive that evening. Because the sun in that field kills. At noon, he goes out into the field. The heat hits him like a blow. He digs a hole with his bare hands. When his hands start to bleed, he picks up a flat stone. He throws a rusty blade into the hole. On top, wormwood, ash, husk. He pours river water over it, stirs it into a brown slurry, and pours it onto the ground. Then he harnesses himself to the old plow. No ox, no helper. He pulls the harness alone under the scorching sun. The crust is as hard as stone. The plowshare sinks in half a finger's depth. He throws his full weight against it. 1 step, 2. The plow gets stuck. He yanks it out and tries again. By evening, a strip 10 paces wide has been plowed. His hands are covered in blood. His back won't straighten, but the brown slurry has soaked into the ground. Dead mana has met with iron oxide, and it has begun to break down. He sees it on the panel, slowly, barely noticeable. But the process has begun. He drops to his knees right in the furrow and laughs. Then he lies down. The earth is warm, alive. So Rin comes for him in the dark with a lamp. She doesn't scold him. Silently, she offers her shoulder. On the way, he says he'll need another bucket of water tomorrow. She says she'll bring 2. For 3 days, he plows the field alone from dawn to dusk. So Rin carries water and flatbreads. His mother sits silently on the edge and believes. The village doesn't believe. Only the fool Tae comes every day and sits beside him. 17 years old, skinny, his mouth is always open. Everyone thinks he's feeble-minded. But Doyun notices one thing. Before the rain on the second day, Tae sat facing west an hour before the first clouds appeared. He remembered that. On the morning of the 4th day, a scream wakes the village. A boy runs down the street shouting. In the field, on the barren field. It's green there. People come out of their houses and freeze. The field turns green. Not in patches, a smooth carpet from edge to edge. Lush sprouts up to the ankles, on ground where nothing has grown for 10 years. The elder is the last to arrive. His pipe slips from his fingers. He stands and stares like a man who has seen a ghost. Doyun stands barefoot in the mud amid the sprouts. His eyes are red from lack of sleep. His back remains hunched, but he smiles. He says it's green manure. Green manure. In 20 days, they'll plow it back in. The earth will come alive. And then they'll plant real rice. And by fall, the village will have food. The elder looks at him for a long time. Then he picks up the pipe, clamps it between his teeth, and says one word. All right, that's enough. Doyun turns to the crowd and speaks calmly. Whoever wants to work, come tomorrow at dawn. There will be food. The crowd is silent. Then one man steps forward. Foolish Tae. He stands beside him and nods. Behind him, an old woman. Then a man with a hunched back. A woman carrying a child. 7 people out of 120. Doyun isn't discouraged. 7 is more than 0. And 0 is where he started 4 days ago. He turns toward the field. The sun rises from behind the dead hills. Golden light falls on the green shoots, and for a moment it seems to him that the earth beneath his feet sighed, as if alive, as if it recognized him. At dawn on the 5th day, Doyun stood at the edge of the field and waited. 7 people came. Tae was the first. Then an old woman named Bon Soon. She was over 60. Her back was bent. Her hands were gnarled, but her eyes were lively. She said she had come not because she believed, but because at her age she had nothing to lose anyway. The man with the hunched back introduced himself as Cho Dae-ho, a former carpenter. He had broken his back on a log 5 years ago. Since then, he hadn't been able to work properly, but his hands still remembered the wood. The woman with the need in her arms was Yu Mi, 20 years old. Her husband had gone to the city for work and never returned. The child was 8 months old. There were 3 more brothers, Park Sung-ho, Park Sung-chol, Park Sung-min. The elders' nephews, young, strong. They came because their uncle told them to. The elder didn't believe in miracles, but he believed his eyes, and his eyes saw a green field. Doyun lined them up. He looked at each one, and he began to explain. He spoke simply, like a first-grade teacher. The earth is sick. There is too much dead mana in it. The mana lies in a layer beneath the topsoil like a rock. The roots cannot break through. The water does not drain. Right now, green manure is growing in the field. It's a grass that heals the earth. Its roots break through the layer of mana and pull the poison upward. In 20 days, they'll plow this grass back into the ground. It will rot and become food for the soil. Then they'll plant rice. Old woman Bon Sun raised her hand. She asked where he. Doyun answered without batting an eye. He said that the legendary farmer class provides knowledge about the land. That was half the truth. But the whole truth wouldn't have helped anyone. He divided the people. He assigned the Park brothers the task of carrying water from the river, 6 buckets each, morning and evening. He put Cho Dae-ho to work whittling stakes for a fence around the field. The fence wasn't needed to keep out people, but animals. Hungry wild boars from the forest could devour the sprouts overnight. He sent you, me, and the child to gather ash through the village. Every handful, from every hearth. Ash is lye. It's needed for the second field. He seated the old woman Bon's son next to Tay. He told her they had a special job. Bon's son would watch over the sprouts, count them every morning. If any patch turned yellow, she had to tell him right away. And Tay would watch the sky. Doyun turned to the young man. Tay was sitting on the ground, looking up as always. Doyun asked him point blank. He asked if he could predict rain. Tay lowered his eyes. For the first time ever, he hesitated. Then he nodded. He said that the clouds talk, that when they turn gray at the bottom and white at the top, it means rain in 3 hours. When the wind from the west smells like iron, it means there would be a thunderstorm. He had known this since childhood, but when he told the adults, they laughed, so he stopped talking. Doyun crouched down in front of him, looked him in the eyes, and said seriously, "Starting today, you're the farm's meteorologist." Tay didn't know that word. Doyun explained. The person in charge of the weather, who watches the sky and warns us when it's going to rain. The entire harvest depends on him, the whole village. Tay stared at him with wide eyes. His lower lip trembled. He asked in a whisper, "Is it true I'm needed?" Doyun nodded. "It's true." Tay turned away. His shoulders shook. He cried silently. For the first time in his life, someone had told him he was needed. Old woman Bon's son sniffed nearby. Doyun didn't wait for the moment to pass. He stood up and said it was time to work. The next 5 days blurred into one. Doyun worked from dawn to dusk. His 7 men worked alongside him. He showed each one what to do, how to water properly, not to pour from above, but to channel the water through the furrows, how to check the sprouts, not to pull them, but to bend down and look at the color of the leaves. If they were pale, it meant a lack of nitrogen. If they were yellowing at the edges, it meant potassium. He spoke these words, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. The people didn't understand, but they saw the result. The sprouts were growing, taller every day, greener every day. On the 8th day, a man arrived in the village on horseback. The horse was well fed, shiny. Among the gaunt people, it looked like an insult. The rider was short, lean, in a clean robe with a silver clasp. His face was sharp as a knife. His eyes were small, quick. Tax official Choi Gyu-hyun. He came twice a year. He took 1/3 of everything the village grew. For the last 2 years, he'd taken almost everything. Because the village grew nothing and paid its debt with old grain from its reserves, there were no more reserves. Choi dismounted at the elder's house. Park Jong-soo came out to meet him. They talked for a long time. Yoon didn't hear what they were saying, but he saw how the elder clenched his fists behind his back, how his knuckles turned white. Then the elder came to him. His face was gray. His voice was steady. He said the official was demanding 20 sacks of rice to cover 3 years' worth of debt. If the village didn't pay by the end of summer, he would file a report and Pumpkin Ford would be disbanded. The people would be scattered to neighboring villages. The land would be handed over to the landlord. Du Yong stood at the edge of the green field and listened. Then he asked how many sacks the village had right now. The elder said 4, and those aren't even full. Du Yong nodded. 20 sacks by the end of summer. From one field, he'd manage 15 at most. So he needs a second field. He went to the second plot. He placed his palm on the ground. The panel lit up. pH 3.9. Worse than the first. More dead mana. But the groundwater is closer. That's both good and bad. Good because it doesn't need as much water. Bad because the salinity is higher. He ran the numbers in his head. If they start tomorrow, if they use the same method with ash and iron, if Tay is right and the rains start in 2 weeks, He'll make it, just barely, with no room for error. He returned to his team. He told them that starting tomorrow, they would open the second field. The Park brothers exchanged glances. They were already barely managing the water for the first field. Doyun said he needed more people. Cho De-ho shook his head. He said there were no more volunteers in the village. Everyone was waiting. They wanted to see the rice before they believed it. Doyun didn't argue. He went to the smithy. Yun Mei was standing at the anvil, straightening a hoe. She looked up. She smiled. She asked how things were going for the legendary farmer. Doyun didn't respond to the joke. He pulled a piece of bark from his belt. On the bark, he had drawn a sketch with charcoal. A plow. But not like the local ones, with an iron blade. With a curved plowshare. A plow like this turns over a layer of soil rather than just scratching the surface. He placed the sketch in front of Yun Mei. She took it, looked at it, squinted, turned the bark over, then again. Her fingers traced the lines. Before Yun knew it, he saw how her face, the mockery was gone. Interest took its place, then surprise, then something like hunger, the hunger of a master who has seen a new challenge. She asked where he had seen it. He said he had come up with it himself. She looked up, said it was impossible, that a blade of this shape requires double forging, that the bend of the plowshare is non-standard, that it's completely unclear how to attach it to the handle. Doyun nodded. He asked if she could forge it. Yun Mei slowly placed the drawing on the anvil. She ran her fingers over it, and answered quietly. She said she could, that she needed 3 days, and iron, lots of iron. Doyun said he would get the iron. He returned to the river. On the bank, fragments of an old bridge jutted out of the mud, rusty brackets, bent pins. He dragged them out of the silt until dark. He hauled 8 pieces, carried them to the forge. Yun Mei accepted them in silence. She weighed each piece in her hand. She nodded and began to work. For 3 days she did not leave the smithy. Smoke rose in a column. The clang of the hammer did not cease until midnight. On the 3rd day she came out, black with soot, with red eyes. She held a plow in her hands. Doyun took it. He turned it over. He ran his finger along the blade. The edge was even. The curve was perfect. The mount fit without any play. He looked at Yun Mei. She was waiting. Her face was stony, but her eyes asked a question. Doyun opened his mouth. The words he spoke made her blink. He said it was a prototype and that it needed refinement. Yun Mei froze. Then her eyes narrowed. She pulled a small hammer from her belt. Before Yun could jump out of the way, the hammer whizzed past his ear. Yun Mei growled. She said she hadn't slept in 3 days. 3 days without sleep. And this was a prototype. Before Yun raised his hands, he spoke quickly. He said the plow was magnificent, the best he'd ever seen, but he knew how to make it even better, and that it was needed not because the work was bad, but because there were 20 fields ahead, not 2. 20, and every field would feed people. Yun Mei lowered the hammer. 20 fields. She counted in her head. 20 plows, 20 sickles, 20 hoes. Months of work, real work, not fixing rusty shovels, forging, her craft. She looked at him in a new light. Before, Young saw that look. He understood it, and added quietly, said that no one in the world but her could forge this, that he needed her specifically. Yun Mei turned away, quickly. He managed to notice that the tips of her ears had turned red. She muttered that she needed more iron, and she went into the smithy, slammed the door. Doyun smiled. He took the plow and went to the second field. The new plow cut through the earth like butter. Where the old wooden one had taken a step an hour, he now took 10 steps. The blade turned the soil over. Dead mana ended up on top, in the sun, in the wind. The oxidized iron in his mixture worked faster in the open ground. On the panel,
He saw the mana disintegrating, faster than in the first field, much faster. He plowed until sunset. Then he plowed by the light of the oil lamp So-rin had brought. She set the lamp on a rock and sat down beside him, silently. She didn't leave until he was done.
When he collapsed on the ridge, exhausted, she took a bowl out of her bundle. The bowl contained rice water, watery but warm. She said she'd traded her last needle for a handful of rice from a merchant. Doyun took the bowl. His hands were shaking. He took a sip. The warmth spread through his body. He looked at his wife, at her slender hands, at her dark eyes in the light of the oil lamp. The old Doyun loved this woman and didn't know how to say it. This Doyun looked at her and said that when he cleared these fields, when the rice grew, he would cook the first bowl for her. So-rin blinked. She looked away. The corners of her lips twitched. She told him to stop talking and eat, and she adjusted his collar. By the end of the second week, the first field was ready for green manure plowing. The green mass stood knee-high, thick, lush. Doyun went out in the morning and ran his hand over the tops. His palm grew wet with dew. He pressed his hand to the ground. The panel lit up. pH 5.2. It had risen by a full point. Dead mana had halved. Nitrogen had tripled. Phosphorus had appeared. Potassium at trace levels, but no longer zero. The earth was waking up. He gathered his team. Now there were not 7, but 12 of them. The 5 newcomers arrived silently, without explanation. They simply saw the green field and lined up. One of them was the old man Hong Pyo, 72 years old, a former swordsman, 5th rank class. His hands shake. He can't lift a sword, but the ox obeys him like a dog. And Hong Pyo had an ox, the last ox in the village, skinny, ribs sticking out, but alive. Doyun harnessed the ox to the new Yun Mei plow. Hong Pyo stood beside it. The ox began to move. The plow cut into the green manure. The green mass turned over in layers and sank into the ground. The smell was sharp, damp, the smell of living earth. In a single day, they plowed the entire first field. Doyun stood at the edge and watched. The turned earth steamed in the morning chill, dark, damp. He lowered his hand. The panel. pH 5.4. Dead mana at 30% of the initial level. A week after the green manure rotted, the mana would be gone entirely. He turned to the people and said that in 10 days they would plant rice. The people had strange expressions on their faces. Not joy, not faith. Something in between. Cautious, like a person afraid of scaring away good luck. 10 days passed quickly. Until then, Yoon worked in the second field during the day. In the evening, he checked the first one. At night, he drew blueprints by lamplight. Blueprints of a sickle with a curved blade. Blueprints of a handheld seeder. Blueprints of a water trough for irrigation. So Rin would wake up in the middle of the night and see his back bent over the bark, a shadow on the wall. His hand moved. The charcoal stick creaked. She didn't say anything. She just lay back down and lay there with her eyes open until he fell asleep. Then she covered him with a blanket. Sometimes she caught herself thinking that this man next to her didn't resemble the one she had married. The old Doyun was quiet, indecisive, kind but weak. This one was quiet in a different way. A silence born not of timidity, but of confidence. He didn't ask if he could. He just did it. And when he spoke, there was a weight to his voice. The weight of a man who knows his words aren't empty. It was both frightening and alluring at the same time. She caught herself staring at his hands, at the way he cupped the soil in his palm, at the way he ran his fingers over the sprout, gently, as if over a child's face. On the 10th day, the rice was planted. Du Yang had grown the seedlings himself in boxes by the house. The seeds had been found by the elder at the bottom of an old sack, a handful, 23 grains. Du Yang sorted through each one. He discarded 7. He planted 16 in the damp cloth. All 16 sprouted. He transplanted them into soil from the first field, mixed with ash and river silt. A week later, the seedlings were the size of a palm, strong, bright green. He planted them in the first field, in even rows, with a distance of 2 palms between the sprouts. The locals planted rice haphazardly, all over the place, thickly. Doyun explained, every sprout needs light, it needs air, it needs space for its roots. If planted too thickly, they will take food from one another, and all will grow weak. If spaced out, each one will be strong. Old woman Bon's son listened. Then she spoke softly. She said that this is true of people too. Doyun looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled genuinely. The green manure in the second field took longer to grow and required more attention. The pH was lower. There was more dead manna. Doyun doubled the dose of ash. He asked the Park brothers to bring more rusty iron from the river. They brought it, but it wasn't enough. He needed something stronger than wormwood and ash. He went to Li Na. The herbalist met him at the door. She crossed her arms. She asked what he wanted this time. Doyun said he needed help. Not ash, not wormwood, her knowledge. Li Na raised an eyebrow. He explained. In the second field, the dead manna is too strong for ordinary methods. He needs a plant that draws not just moisture from the ground, but the poison itself. A plant with deep roots, greedy roots, one that takes everything that's down there and pulls it upward. Li Na listened. Then she said she knew of such a plant, mountain sorrel. It grows in the ravines north of the village. Its roots go down 3 cubits. It pulls everything out of the ground, including poisons. That's why no one eats it. Doyun asked her to bring some. Li Na said the ravines were a half-day's journey away, and that wild boars roamed there. He said he would go himself. Li Na looked at him, at his skinny body, at his calloused hands, at the dark circles under his eyes, and she said he was an idiot, that a boar would crush him with a single hoof, and that she would go with him, because she was a herbalist and knew exactly where the sorrel grew. And he didn't. Doyun didn't argue. The next morning they set out before dawn. Li Na walked ahead, quickly, long legs, a confident stride. She knew every path, every rock, every tree. She was silent along the way. Then she couldn't hold back. She asked how he did what he did, how he knew what he knew. Doyun thought about his answer. Then he told the truth, part of it. He said that his class gave him knowledge about the land and plants. But not all knowledge. He needed someone who knew the local herbs, the local soils, the local diseases. He said that without her, he couldn't manage. Li Na snorted. She said it was flattery. Doyun shook his head. He said it was a fact, that he knew the principles, and she knew the details. Principles without details are dead. Li Na walked in silence for another half hour. Then she spoke up herself. She told him that 3 years ago, an alchemist from the capital's guild had come. He promised to revive the fields for 100. The village scraped together 70. The alchemist took the money. He poured 5 bottles of green elixir into the ground. The field turned green for 3 days. Then it died. The alchemist left. He didn't return the money. After that, the village stopped trusting anyone. Doyun nodded. He said he understood. And that was exactly why he didn't promise miracles. He promised work, a lot of work, and results that people would see with their own eyes. In the gorge, they found mountain sorrel, dark green leaves, thick stems, powerful roots reaching into the crevices of the rocks. Doyun dropped to his knees. He placed his hand on the ground next to a root. The panel lit up. He saw how the sorrel's roots were drawing minerals from the rock, how they were breaking down the stone, how they were extracting and accumulating substances that would kill any other plant. Perfect. He began digging it up. Li Na crouched down beside him. She showed him the right way, not to cut the root, but to twist it out, to keep the tip intact. Otherwise, it wouldn't take root. They worked side by side for an hour, in silence, shoulder to shoulder. Li Na moved with precision, economically, every movement measured, like a surgeon's. Doyun found himself admiring her. Then a branch snapped. Li Na froze. She slowly raised her head. A boar stood at the edge of the ravine, big, black, yellow tusks, small, angry eyes. It stared at them and snorted. Doyun didn't move. Neither did Li Na. The boar shifted its hooves, took a step forward. Du Yong slowly reached into his bag. He pulled out a handful of rice husks he'd brought along for a snack. He tossed them on the ground in front of the boar. The beast froze. It lowered its snout, sniffed, then began to eat, greedily, quickly. Du Yong tossed another handful, a little farther away. The boar went after the food, then another, and another. Du Yong lured it away from the gorge, handful by handful. When the husks ran out, the boar raised its head. It looked at Du Yong, snorted, and walked off into the forest. Li Na exhaled. Her hands were shaking. She said he was crazy, that the boar could have killed him. Du Yong shrugged. He said that a hungry beast doesn't attack if it's being fed. That rule applies to everyone, to animals and to people. Li Na looked at him for a long time, and for the first time, she didn't know what to say. They returned to the village by evening with a sack of mountain sorrel. Doyun planted it along the edges of the second field. 3 days later, the sorrel had taken root. A week later, its roots broke through the mana layer and pulled the poison upward. The panel showed the mana depleting. Faster than in the first field, the mountain sorrel worked like a pump. Meanwhile, rice was growing in the first field. Every morning, Du Yong came to check on it. The sprouts were stretching upward, strong, green, even. By the end of the 3rd week, they were knee-high. Doyun saw the experience level on the panel. The bar was filling up slowly but surely. Every sprout planted, every bed watered, every day of work in the field earned him points. And with every point, he felt his abilities growing. Soil reading became more accurate. Now he could see not only the main indicators, but also the trace elements: boron, manganese, copper, and something else. Growth speed. A passive ability. Plants within 10 paces of him grew a quarter faster. Just a quarter for now, but the experience bar kept filling up. At the end of the 3rd week, what he had both been waiting for and feared happened. Tay arrived in the morning. He sat down next to him, looked up at the sky, and said briefly, 3 days, heavy rain. Doyun understood immediately. He dropped everything, gathered a team, 12 people. The rice in the first field was gaining strength. By the end of the 4th week, the stalks were waist-high, dark green, thick. The ears of rice began to fill out. Doyun walked along the rows every morning and touched the leaves. He checked the color, the density, the angle. By the angle of the ear, you can tell if it's heavy or empty. These were heavy, every single one. Elder Park Jong-soo now came to the field every day. He stood at the edge, smoked his pipe, said nothing. But one morning he didn't come alone. People followed him. 23 people, men and women, old men and teenagers. They stood behind the elder and looked out at the field. The elder turned to Doyun. He spoke briefly. They want to work. Doyun nodded. Now his team numbered 35 people, almost a third of the village's working-age population. He divided them into groups, 5 for irrigation, watering and maintaining the canals, 5 for the second field. The green manure was already knee-high there and would soon need to be plowed under. 10 people for the third field, the farthest one, the most depleted, pH 3.7. Most of it was dead mana, but it was also the largest area. If they could get the third field ready by fall, that would mean another 10 sacks of rice. 10 sacks was the difference between life and death for a third of the village. He sent the rest to gather supplies: ash, iron, river silt, mountain sorrel, firewood. Everything was needed in huge quantities. Cho Dae-ho took charge of the construction crew. His hunched back made it impossible for him to dig, but his hands remembered wood. He began building a warehouse, a small one, out of logs and clay. So Rin helped him. She mixed clay with straw. She plastered the walls. She worked in silence, quickly, her hands buried in clay up to her elbows. Doyun saw her from afar and stopped for a second every time. He watched. Then he walked on. Lena came to the field more and more often. At first she said she was checking to see if the seedlings were sick. Then she stopped making excuses. She just came and worked, weeded, watered, in silence. Doyun noticed that she had started bringing herbal infusions for the workers. Bitter, but they took away the fatigue. Li Na didn't explain it to anyone. She just set the pitcher on the edge of the field and left. People drank and went back to work. One evening, Doyun caught her by the field. She was standing over a row of plants, touching a rice stalk, gently, with 2 fingers, like taking a pulse. He approached quietly. She didn't turn around. Without turning, she said the rice was healthy, strong, that her hands had been healing people for 10 years, and now she touches a plant, and it's healthy too. And that makes her feel strangely good. Doyun stood beside her. He didn't answer. He just stood there. Then he said that plants and people get sick in similar ways. Lack of nutrition, bad water, poisoned soil. If you know one, you'll understand the other. Li Na turned to him. There was something new in her eyes, not hostility, not sarcasm. Something was both warm and frightened at the same time. She quickly turned away and left. In the 5th week, trouble came. One morning, the old woman Bon's son ran up to him. She was gasping for breath. Her face was white. She said the children had fallen ill. The 3 children he had seen on the first day, with swollen bellies, diarrhea, fever, vomiting. Doyun left the field and went to the village. The children were lying in Yumi's house, small, pale, sunken eyes. The youngest was about 5, the oldest maybe 8. He crouched down beside them, touched their foreheads, hot. Their bellies were swollen. He knew what it was. He'd seen it in Korean villages after floods, an intestinal infection from dirty water. The children had been drinking from the ditch because the well had dried up a week ago. He stood up and went to see Li Na. The herbalist already knew. She was sitting in her room, grinding herbs. Her hands moved quickly. Her face was tense. She said she'd given them a bark decoction, but it wasn't helping. That this was the 3rd time in a year, and that last time, 1 child didn't survive. Doyun sat down across from her. He thought. Then he said, "Boil them some rice water over coals, pure, no spices, no herbs, just rice and clean water. Boil it for a long time, until it's thick, and give them a sip every hour." Li Na raised her eyebrows. She said that rice water isn't medicine, that it's food for babies. Doyun nodded. He said that's exactly why it works. Rice starch coats the stomach and intestines. It stops water loss. It provides energy without burdening digestion. It doesn't cure the infection, but it gives the body time to fight it off on its own. Li Na looked at him. He was saying things that no farmer knew, no alchemist either. The words were simple, but behind them lay a knowledge she couldn't explain. She didn't argue. She went and made the broth. Doyun gave her a handful of rice from his field. Young, not yet ripe, but already starchy. Li Na cooked. Doyun sat next to the children. He fed them sip by sip. The youngest didn't want to drink. He cried. Doyun picked him up, rocked him. The child quieted down, fell asleep. Doyun held him and thought about how, in the 21st century, people don't die from this. A packet of rehydron and an antibiotic. But here, a child could die from dirty water because the well had dried up. By morning, the youngest was feeling better. By evening of the 2nd day, all 3 were drinking the broth on their own and asking for food. On the 3rd day, they left the house, skinny, pale, but alive. Li Na stood in the doorway and watched them. Doyun approached. She didn't turn around. He could see her shoulders were tense. She spoke quietly. She said that 10 years ago, her younger sister had fallen ill in the same way. The same diarrhea, the same fever. Li Na gave her everything she knew. Herbs, infusions, compresses. Nothing helped. Her sister died a week later. She was 6 years old. Since then, Li Na had worked every day without rest. She studied every herb, memorized every recipe, and still, once a year, someone would die. And she couldn't stop it. Doyun was silent. Then he spoke. He asked what his sister's symptoms had been. Li Na described them. Diarrhea, fever, then sores in the mouth, then weakness, then her skin started peeling. Doyun listened, and he recognized it. Pellagra, a lack of niacin, vitamin B3, a disease that arises from a monotonous diet. When a person eats only one food for years, most often corn or millet. No meat, no vegetables, no variety. He didn't say the word. Li Na didn't know him. He said something else. He said that his sister didn't die of an illness. She died of starvation. Slow starvation. When the body gets food but doesn't get what it needs. It wasn't her fault. It was the fault of the land that didn't yield. The fault of the drought that scorched the fields. The fault of a world where children eat bark and die from a lack of a single substance found in a handful of pumpkin seeds. Li Na stood motionless, back straight, arms at her sides. Doyun continued. He said he would grow pumpkins in the second field, and corn, and beans, everything needed so that children like these wouldn't die. Not just one crop, 5, 10, so there would be variety on the table, so the body would get everything it needed. And he said he needed Li Na, because he knows what to grow, and she knows who is sick. Together, they can do what neither a farmer nor a herbalist can do alone. Li Na didn't answer for a long time. Then she turned around. Her eyes were red. She wasn't crying, but she was on the verge of it. She said one word, "Okay," and she went to her room. Doyu watched her go. He knew she would cry, alone, in her own home, behind a closed door, just as she had cried for 10 years. But today, she was crying differently, not out of helplessness, but because, for the first time in 10 years, someone had told her that it wasn't her fault. The rest of the month was spent working. The second field had been planted with rice. The third was being prepared. Yun Mei forged 2 more plows and a set of sickles. She worked day and night, silently, fiercely. Every item that came from her hands was perfect. Doyun brought her a new blueprint, a handheld seeder, a wooden tube with an iron tip. You push it into the ground, you drop the grain, press down with your foot. The grain goes to the right depth, 5 times faster than by hand. Yun Mei studied the blueprint for an hour. Then she asked why he was showing it to her. She was a blacksmith, not a carpenter. Doyun said the tip had to be iron, a specific shape, at a specific angle, and that only she could do it. Yun Mei snorted, but she took the blueprint. 2 days later, the seeder was ready. Doyun tested it on the third field. He planted a row in 10 minutes. By hand, it would have taken an hour. He returned to the smithy. Yun Mei was standing by the door, waiting. He lifted the seeder and said it worked perfectly. Yun Mei nodded. Then she spoke slowly. She said that she used to forge swords, beautiful ones, sharp ones, that nobody needed. And now she forges plows and cedars, ugly, rough, and people come for them every day. She said she didn't know if she liked it or not, but that her hands don't lie, and her hands reach for the anvil on their own in the morning. Doyun listened. Then he said quietly that a beautiful sword kills 1 person, but a rough plow feeds 100, and that her hands understand this before she does. Yun Mei stared at him. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She turned away. She muttered that she had no time to chat, and that it was time for him to go to the field. But Doyun saw. Her ears were red. The days passed. The rice in the first field was turning golden. The ears were getting heavier. The stalks were bending. Doyun counted the days. By his calculations, harvest was in 2 weeks. Fast rice. The very kind that ripens not in 4 months, but in 2. A class ability. Seeds of the highest order. First level. He hadn't chosen this variety on purpose. He'd simply planted ordinary seeds. But the class had altered them, accelerated them. And when he looked at the field through the panel, he saw a flickering line next to every stalk. Fast rice. Rank 1. Maturation time. 58 days. Yield. Plus 40%. The locals didn't know about this. To them, rice is rice. They just saw that it was growing faster and thicker than anyone else's in the area. And that was enough to draw new people to him. Every day. 1 or 2 at a time. By the end of the 6th week, his team had 50 people. Half the village. And the other half stood on the sidelines and waited for the harvest, which was supposed to decide everything. The rice in the first field ripened on the 58th day. Doyun went out at dawn and saw the field golden. The stalks stood heavy. the ears bent toward the ground. The grains were full, round. He plucked an ear, rubbed the grain between his fingers. Hard, white inside, with a light, sweet scent. Ready. He stood at the edge of the field and looked at the gold he had grown from the dead earth. 2 months ago, there had been nothing but rock here, a gray crust. 10 years without a single sprout. Now, before him stood a field of real rice. His eyes stung. He blinked, wiped his face with his sleeve, and went to wake the people. By noon, the entire village was standing in the field, all 120 people. Those who had worked and those who had waited. Those who had believed and those who had laughed 2 months ago. They stood in silence. They looked at the golden field. Elder Park Jong-soo stood at the front. The pipe in his teeth had gone out. He'd forgotten to light it. Old woman Bonsun was crying quietly, covering her mouth with her hand. Doyun's mother stood next to So-rin. Both were silent. The mother squeezed her daughter-in-law's hand. So-rin squeezed her mother-in-law's hand. Silly Tae sat on the ground and looked at the rice. He was smiling, widely, happily, like a child. Doyun handed out the sickles. Yun-mi had forged 12 of them, new ones, with curved blades based on his design, lightweight, sharp. They fit in the hand like an extension of the fingers. He showed them how to cut, not to tear the stalk, but to slice it at the base, in one motion. The left hand gathers the bundle, the right hand cuts. A step forward, next bundle. Rhythm, like breathing. He started first. The sickle swept through the stalks with a soft rustle. The bundle fell into his hand. He laid it on the ground. Step forward. Next. So-rin stood behind him, then Li-na, then the Park brothers, then the whole village. 120 people in a single field. The sickles rustled, the stalks fell. Golden sheaves lay in rows. Children ran behind them, gathering the fallen grains. Every single grain, not a single one left on the ground. The harvest continued until sunset. When the last stalk was cut, Du-yong stood up straight. His back was burning. His hands were calloused. His legs were trembling. But the field was harvested. The sheaves stood in neat rows like soldiers. Du-yong asked the Park brothers to bring the sacks, old ones, full of holes, whatever they had. They threshed the grain right there in the field, a simple method. They threw the sheaves onto a spread-out cloth and beat them with flails. The grains poured out, golden, full, clean. When the last sack was tied shut, Du-yong counted. 18 sacks. He'd expected 15. It turned out to be 18, a class ability, a 40% increase in yield. He hadn't been mistaken. The villagers stood around the sacks in silence. 18 sacks of rice. To them, it was like Gold Mountain, like a wall between them and death, like a promise that this winter would not be the last. The elder approached Du-yun. He stood beside him. He was silent for a long time. Then he said that in 40 years of his rule, he had never seen such a harvest from a single field, that his father hadn't seen it, nor his grandfather, that he didn't know how to explain it, and that he didn't need an explanation. He needed this to continue. Doyun nodded. He said it would continue, but not for free. He needed people, everyone who could work, on the 3rd field, on the 4th, on the irrigation, on building the mill. The elder nodded. He turned toward the village and said one word. You heard it. The people nodded. There was no argument, no doubt. 18 sacks outweighed all words. That same evening, Doyun hosted the first dinner. Not a feast, just dinner. In the square in front of the elder's house. So-rin and Yu-mi cooked rice, fresh rice, from Doyun's field. A large pot for 120 people. When the lid was lifted, the scent wafted over the square, hot, sweetish, rich, the scent of fresh rice. People stood and breathed it in. Some closed their eyes. Old woman Bonson pressed her hands to her chest. because she couldn't remember the last time it had smelled like that. Maybe 20 years ago, maybe 30. The rice was divided into bowls, not full bowls, but not empty ones either. Everyone got some. Everyone. And the children with swollen bellies, and the elderly, and the mothers, and those who worked in the fields, and those who didn't believe. Everyone. Doyun sat on the ground and ate his portion. The rice was good. White, fluffy, sticky, with that very sweet aftertaste that only a fresh harvest has. He ate and thought about his grandfather's field in Choya, about how rice smells when it's cooked in an old wood-fired cauldron, about what his grandfather always said. Rice isn't just food. Rice is a promise of what tomorrow will bring. So Rin was sitting nearby. She was eating slowly, grain by grain, as if she wanted to remember every single one. Doyun turned toward her. He looked at her. She looked up. Her eyes were filled with tears. She wasn't crying. Her eyes were just wet. She said quietly that the rice was delicious. He nodded. He said he'd promised her the first bowl. He couldn't. The first one went to the elder. But he promises her something else, that she'll never have to eat bark instead of bread again. So Rin turned away. He saw her shoulders tremble. She didn't answer. She just moved closer. Their shoulders touched. Across the square, the old woman Bonsun was eating rice and crying. She didn't hide it. Tears dripped into her bowl. She said aloud that the last time she'd eaten rice like this was with her late husband, that he would have liked it, that he always liked it when the rice was a little sticky. No one answered. They just sat there side by side and ate. Silly Tay finished his portion and played a homemade flute, a simple reed stick with 3 holes. The melody was off-key, but warm, like a fire in the hearth. The children sat around him and listened. Full. For the first time in a long time. Li Na stood off to the side, with a bowl in her hands. She didn't sit down with the rest of the group, out of habit. 10 years of loneliness. Doyun stood up. He walked over to her, said there was room. Li Na shook her head, said she was used to being alone. He didn't insist, just sat down next to her on the ground, leaned against the wall, and began to eat, in silence. Li Na stood, then sat down too. They ate side by side without speaking. Yun Mei was the last to arrive, with soot on her face, with a hammer on her shoulder. She'd been working in the smithy until dark. Someone handed her a bowl. She sat down on the smithy's threshold and began to eat, quickly, hungrily. Then she froze. She put down her chopsticks, looked into the bowl, sniffed, and began to eat more slowly, grain by grain, just like Sorin, as if she were trying to figure out what the taste was. Doyun saw her from the other end of the square. He saw her sitting alone on the threshold, eating, small, covered in soot, with a hammer at her feet and rice in her hands. The square fell silent. People were eating. Tay was playing. The stars came out. Oil lamps burned on the posts. Those people lay sprawled on the trampled earth. And in this silence was something the village hadn't known in 10 years. Not joy, not a celebration. Peace. The simple peace of a sated evening, when the stomach is full and tomorrow holds no fear. The next morning, an official arrived. Che Gyu-hyun rode in on his gleaming horse, alone, without guards. He dismounted by the square. He saw the sacks, 18 sacks by the warehouse wall. His eyes narrowed. He walked over. He untied one, reached inside, pulled out a handful, looked at it, sniffed it, rubbed the grain between his fingers. His face changed slowly. Surprise, disbelief, then something cold, calculating. Doyun approached him. Sho turned around, said it was impossible, that nothing had grown in that field for 10 years, that 3 alchemists had failed, that a village boy with a farmer's education couldn't have done in 2 months what the masters couldn't. Asked who had helped him, from which guild, what elixir he had used. Doyun answered calmly, "No one. None. It's the earth. It isn't dead. It was sick." He cured it. Cho looked at him. A sharp face, small, quick eyes. Doyun could see the gears clicking inside them. The official was calculating, estimating, weighing. Cho said 20 sacks. That was the village's debt. He would take 20. Doyun said there were 18 sacks, and that he acknowledged the debt for 3 years, but 18 was all there was from that one field. He offered 15. 3 sacks for each year of debt, 5 per year. That's the law. The village would be left with 3 sacks, for seeds, for food. Chui smirked. He said that the law is whatever he says it is, and that he says 20. Doyun's expression didn't change. He said quietly that if the official takes 20, there will be nothing left to take. The village will eat what's left. There would be no rice for planting. The field would be empty the following year, and instead of 20 sacks next year, the official wouldn't get a single one. But if he took 15, Doyun would cultivate 2 more fields. By next summer, the harvest would be 50 sacks, and 15 of them would go to the official. Every year, like clockwork. Cho listened. His face didn't change, but his eyes were calculating. 15 sacks now and 15 every year, or 20 now and 0 later. Even a rat would choose the long-term food supply. Cho nodded. He said 15, but he warned, if there were no sacks by next summer, he would file a report, and the village would be gone. Doyun nodded. 15 sacks were loaded onto the cart. Cho drove off. Doyun stood and watched him go. 3 sacks, 3 left, for 120 people, for seeds and for food. Not enough. Not nearly enough. But the second field was already turning green, and the third would be ready in 3 weeks. He turned to So-rin. She was standing nearby, watching the cart drive away. Her face was calm, but her fingers were clenched into fists. Doyun took her hand, unclenched her fingers. She flinched, then she relaxed. He said that 3 sacks wasn't much, but it was 3 sacks more than there had been 2 months ago, and that in a month there would be more. So-rin didn't answer. She just stood there, holding his hand, and she didn't let go. He didn't pull away. They stood like that in the square of the deserted village, the 2 of them, side by side, with 3 sacks of rice by the wall, and with 2 fields beyond the outskirts where the future was green. But Doyun wasn't thinking about the rice. He was thinking about Chae Gyu-hyun's face, about his eyes, about how quickly surprise had turned to calculation. This man wouldn't just take the sacks and leave. He would tell. He would tell in the capital. He would tell other officials. He would tell those who shouldn't be told. The third field was harder to work than the others. H 3.7. 3 times as much dead mana as there was in the first one. Doyun poured everything he had into this soil. Ash, rusty iron, mountain sorrel, river silt. Every morning he came and placed his palm on the soil. The panel flickered red. The mana was receding, but slowly, as if the earth didn't want to let go of its poison. He doubled the sorrel planting. The roots went deep. They pulled. But it wasn't enough. In the second field, the rice had grown to his knees, green, strong. In 3 weeks, there would be a second harvest. Doyun counted in his head, 3 sacks in reserve, 120 mouths, a handful a day. 1 sack would last 10 days, 3 for a month. The second harvest in 3 weeks, just enough. As always, just enough. He divided the 3 sacks, 1 for seeds for the third field, 2 for food. So Rin took charge of the distribution. Every morning she handed out the rice to the families, a handful per person, the same for everyone, no exceptions. The elder received as much as the last laborer. Doyun got as much as the children. So Rin oversaw this with a stern face. No one argued, because everyone saw that she herself ate last, and ate the least of all. Doyun noticed this on the 3rd day. In the evening after work, he found her by the warehouse. She was counting the sacks. He asked how much she had eaten today. So Rin didn't answer. He asked again. She said it was enough. He looked at her sunken cheeks, at the dark circles under her eyes, and he realized she was giving away her share every day to one of the children or the elderly. He didn't scold her. He just took her by the hand and led her home. He cooked the rice himself, a small handful. He set it in front of her, sat down across from her, and waited until she had eaten it all. So Rin ate in silence, without looking up. When the bowl was empty, he took it away and said one thing. He said that if she collapsed from hunger, there would be no one left to distribute the rice, and that he needed her alive. The village needed her alive. So Rin looked at him for a long time, then she nodded. From that day on, she ate her portion, all of it. But Doyun could see that every time, she was forcing herself to do it. Not because she didn't want to, but because it hurt her to eat when there were hungry children around. It was in her, deep down, deeply ingrained. He remembered that. A week after the deal with the official, the first strangers arrived in the village. 3 families, 13 people, from the village of Sukhoi Log, a 2-day journey to the east. Bandits had burned Sukhoi Log a month ago. They took everything: grain, livestock, cloth. The people they didn't kill, they drove away. These 13 were heading south, hungry, ragged, children in their arms, an old man on homemade crutches. They'd heard from a merchant on the road that there was food in Tikveni Brod. The elder met them at the gate. He looked at Doyun. Doyun looked at the 13 people, at the children with empty eyes, at the woman with a baby who wasn't crying. Infants who don't cry are a bad sign. It means they don't have the strength to cry. He said one word: "We'll take them." The elder opened his mouth, closed it. They can barely feed their own, and now there are 13 more. Doyun said that 13 mouths meant 13 pairs of hands, that the third field couldn't be harvested without people, that everyone who could hold a hoe will work, and those who can't will do what they can. Wash clothes, cook, watch the children, mend clothes, weave baskets. There are no useless people. There are only people for whom no task has been found. The elder looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded. The refugees were housed in 2 empty houses on the edge of the village, so Rin allocated them rice from the communal supply. Li Na examined the children. 2 had worms. 1 had a fever. She treated them. Doyun farmed. 3 days later, the newcomers went out into the fields. They worked in silence, eagerly. That's how those who know the value of food work. Among the refugees was one man whom Doyun noticed right away. A man in his 40s, quiet, with heavy hands, broad shoulders, a scar on his neck. He didn't speak to anyone. He worked harder than anyone else. He ate less than anyone else. He slept by the wall without going inside the house. Doyun approached him on the second day. He asked his name. The man didn't answer right away. He said his name was Kang Jae, a former soldier, 10 years in the Central Province's army. He deserted after his unit was sent to its death in a border skirmish. He wandered for a year, ended up in Dry Hollow. When the village was burned down, he led these 13 out. He couldn't save the rest. Doyun listened. Then he asked if the man knew how to build walls. Kang Jae looked up. He said that in the army he had built camp fortifications, Palisades, earthen ramparts, moats. Doyun nodded. He said he needed a wall around the settlement. Not now, in a month, when the harvest from the second field came in and the people were fed. But he needed a plan now. Kang Jae looked at him. He asked why a wall. Doyun answered bluntly. He said rumors about his harvest were already spreading, that an official had seen the sacks and left with a gleam in his eyes, that merchants on the road were gossiping, and that sooner or later, those who wanted to take rather than ask would come. Kang Jae nodded. He knew what Doyun was talking about. He'd seen it, many times. A place of plenty in a hungry world is a target. The next day, Kang Jae walked around the village, the entire perimeter. He returned with a stick on which he had sketched a plan. A wall of logs and rammed clay, 3 meters high, with 4 watchtowers at the corners, a moat on the outside, a single gate. Doyun looked at the sketch. He did the math. Said they needed more people, lots of people, and lots of wood. Kang Jae said there was wood in the grove to the south, but no people. Doyun smiled, said the people would come. He wasn't wrong. A week later, 2 more families arrived. 2 weeks later, 5 more. Word of the village with food spread along the roads like smoke. By the end of the second month, there were 160 people in Pumpkin Ford, 40 new ones. Doyun welcomed everyone. He gave everyone a task. He fed everyone. The rice from the second field ripened right on schedule, 22 sacks, more than from the first. The soil was better. The sorrel had worked. Doyun stood by the sacks and counted. 22 plus the 3 left over from the first harvest. 25. Minus 15 for the debt to the official on his next visit. 10. For 160 people. And the third field hadn't yielded a harvest yet. Not enough. Not enough again. He began to think differently. Rice is good, but rice alone won't feed everyone. He needs other crops, fast-growing, hardy, high-calorie. He went to the third field. He placed his palm on it. The panel lit up. The pH rose to 4.9. There was still mana, but no longer a solid wall, just intermittent patches. The earth was waking up. But it was still too early for rice. Just right for something else, though. He opened the class panel, the list of available seeds. The level had risen. He'd felt it these past few days. Every sheaf harvested, every field watered, every new person eating his rice. All of it gave him experience. The bar had crossed the first mark, level 2. And new entries appeared on the list. Fast-growing pumpkin, maturity 40 days, high resistance to acidic soil, calorie content 3 times higher than usual. Iron beans, maturity 35 days, protein content twice the norm, grow in poor soil. Early corn, maturity 45 days, rich in niacin. He looked at the list and thought of Li Na, of her sister, of the pellagra that had killed her. Corn rich in niacin. If only they'd had corn like this 10 years ago. He chose all 3 crops, pumpkins in the western part of the field, beans in the eastern part, corn in the center. Crop rotation. Different crops take different things from the soil. Beans fix nitrogen. Pumpkins loosen the topsoil with their foliage. Corn draws phosphorus from deep down. Together, they don't deplete the soil, but heal it. In his previous work, it was called polyculture farming. Here, it wasn't called anything, because no one here did it. He planted the seeds. The pumpkin sprouted in 3 days, the beans in 5, the corn in a week. The third field came to life, colorful, bright, green, yellow, white. People came and watched. They saw 3 different plants in one field. To them, it was wild. That's not how it's done. Always just one. Rice or millet. One. Doyun explained, patiently, for the 10th time, that the earth is like a person. It can't eat only rice. It needs variety. And if you plant different things together, each one helps its neighbor. Some understood. Most didn't. But everyone saw that he was succeeding, and that was enough. Li Na came to the third field when the corn had grown waist-high. She stood and watched. Then she walked up to him. She asked quietly what kind of corn it was, why the ears were larger than usual, why the color was different. Doyun looked at her. Then he spoke. He said that this corn contained the very thing that had killed her sister, a substance that prevents the skin from peeling and sores from forming. If only such corn had existed back then. He didn't finish his sentence. Li Na stood before him, her face turned pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at him, and he saw something inside her break. The wall she had been building for 10 years, stone by stone, out of guilt, out of pain, out of working herself to exhaustion. That wall was cracking. She didn't cry, not in front of him. She turned and walked away quickly. Doyun didn't follow her. He knew there was no need. That evening, Li Na came to his house, so Rin opened the door. Li Na stood in the doorway. Her eyes were red. Her face was clean-shaven. Her back was straight. She said she was ready to work, that he had told her that together they could do more, that she agreed, that now she wasn't just a herbalist who treated people only after they were already in pain. She wants to prevent the pain from happening in the first place. Doyun nodded. So Rin stood nearby. She looked at Li Na, then at her husband. Something flashed quickly in her eyes. Not jealousy, not anger, wariness. She saw how Li Na was looking at her husband. She saw that there was more to that look than professional interest. By the end of the 3rd month, the pumpkins in the 3rd field had grown to the size of a child's head, bright orange, heavy. Doyun cut down the first one, sliced it open with a knife. The flesh was soft, dark yellow. It smelled sweet. He took half to Sorin, the other half to Li Na. He told them both the same thing. Cook it. Sorin cooked porridge, thick, with a pinch of salt. Li Na made a broth, liquid, for sick old people who have trouble chewing. In the evening, people in the square ate pumpkin porridge. The old woman Bonsun took a spoon, brought it to her mouth, tasted it, froze. The spoon hung motionless in the air. She sat like that for a few seconds. Then she lowered the spoon and said quietly that the last time she had eaten such porridge was with her late husband, 30 years ago, when the earth in the south was still fertile, when the pumpkins were big and sweet, when the house smelled of pumpkin and firewood in the fall. She ate and cried, without wiping away her tears. They dripped into the bowl, and she ate them along with the porridge. No one said a word. The beans were harvested a week later. The pods were packed with seeds, solid, heavy, protein, lots of protein. Doyun cooked the first batch himself. He tasted it. The flavor was rich, filling, like meat, only from the earth. He distributed the beans among the families. The children ate greedily. After 3 days, their swollen bellies began to flatten. The protein deficiency was receding. Li Na watched over them. She examined them every day. She felt their bellies. She checked their gums, their eyes, their skin. On the 5th day, she came to Doyun. She said the youngest boy's belly was soft, for the first time in 6 months, that his gums had turned pink, that his eyes had grown brighter. She spoke in an even voice, professional, but her hands were trembling. Doyun nodded. He said the beans were just the beginning. We need more. Milk, eggs, greens, everything the body provides. Li Na asked where to get milk and eggs if there wasn't a single cow or chicken in the village. Doyun said he'd figure something out. He thought about it for 3 days. Then he went into the forest, alone. In the morning, he took a sack of beans and a handful of rice husks with him. He remembered that boar in the ravine, hungry, black, with yellow fangs. And he remembered how it had left after getting food. Tamed fields, a 3rd-level ability. Wild animals that have eaten his grain become attached to the farm 3 times over. They aren't trained. They remember who fed them. Before long, he found a boar trail half an hour from the village. Fresh tracks, droppings, rutted earth. He poured the beans onto the trail. He stepped back 20 paces. He sat down on a rock and waited. An hour later, a boar came. Not that one. Another one, smaller, a female, with 2 piglets. She saw the beans, froze, sniffed the air, sensed a human, tensed up. The piglets didn't wait. They ran up and started eating. The female stood there. She looked at Doyun. He sat motionless, didn't move, didn't look her in the eyes. He looked away. 5 minutes later, the female approached the beans. She ate slowly, cautiously, one eye on the food, the other on him. Doyun waited until they finished eating. Then he stood up, slowly, walked away. He returned the next day with a new handful, and the day after that. On the 3rd day, the female didn't flinch when he approached within 10 steps. The piglets ran up to his feet. One nudged his knee with its snout. Doyun crouched down. He placed the beans in his palm. The piglet ate from his hand. The panel flashed. A line of text. Wild boar. Feeding. 3 of 3. Tied to the farm. Confirm. He confirmed. The piglet looked at him, snorted, and followed him toward the village. The female followed, and the second piglet. Doyun led them to the field fence. The people froze. Boars in the village, wild, with fangs. Kang Jae placed his hand on the hilt of his knife. Doyun raised his hand. He said calmly that they were guards. They wouldn't attack. They were tied to the farm. As long as he fed them, they protected the fields. From rodents, from other boars, from wolves. The people looked at him skeptically, but the boars behaved calmly. The female lay down in the shade by the fence. The piglets were rooting in the ground near the garden beds. They didn't touch the sprouts, they only dug along the border. Doyun explained that the boars loosened the soil no worse than a plow, that their manure was the best fertilizer, that overnight they would devour all the field mice within a 100-yard radius. The elder listened, then he shook his head. He said that in 40 years he had seen a lot, but this was the first time he had seen a farmer who tames wild boars. By the end of the week, there were 4 wild boars. Another male arrived, young, large. Doyun fed him for 3 days. On the 4th day, the male lay down at the threshold of the barn and didn't leave. He became a guard. At night, 3 wolves came out of the forest, drawn by the scent of grain. The male boar stood up, bared his fangs, gurgled. The wolves stood there. They watched and left. In the morning, Kang Ji found tracks by the fence. He looked at the boar, then at Doyun, and for the first time, he smiled. Meanwhile, work on the wall had begun. Kang Ji commanded a construction crew of 20 men. They chopped down trees, they hewn logs, they dug in posts, they tamped clay between them. The work was hard, slow, but steady. Yun Mei was forging the hinges and latches for the gate. Doyun brought her a blueprint of a water wheel. She looked at him, at the blueprint, back at him. She asked what it was. He explained. A wheel turned by water. The river flows, it presses against the blades, the wheel turns. The axle turns the millstone grinds the grain. A mill, without people, without an ox. It works day and night as long as the river flows. Yun Mei looked at the drawing, then at the river behind the village, then at the drawing. Her eyes were burning. It wasn't just a wheel, it was a task, a real one, a difficult one, requiring a skill that had grown rusty over the years. She said she needed a week, and a lot of iron. Doyun nodded. The Park brothers went back into the river to search for the debris of the old bridge. While Yun Mei worked on the mill, Doyun took on the 4th field, the last one, the biggest, the most devastated. pH 3.5, a solid layer of dead mana. Not even mountain sorrel could break through the roots here. He stood at the edge and watched. The panel glowed red. Hopeless. For an ordinary farmer. But he wasn't ordinary. He closed his eyes. He thought. He remembered. Phytoremediation of heavy metals. 3rd-year course. Professor Kim had said that if the plants couldn't handle it, you had to change your approach. Don't pull the poison upward. Neutralize it on the spot. Bind it chemically. Turn it into a harmless compound. Dead mana breaks down upon contact with iron oxide. He already knew that. But there's too much mana here. It takes not just iron, but iron in motion, in a flow. He needs water with a high iron content that will pass through the layer of mana and bind it. He needs drainage, deep drainage through the entire layer of contaminated soil. He went to Cho Dae-ho, explained what was needed. Pipes, wooden ones, made from hollow tree trunks. 4 pipes driven into the ground to a depth of 2 cubits. He would pour the iron-rich water through them. Cho Dae-ho listened. He nodded. In 2 days, he found 4 dry tree trunks. He burned out the core. They became pipes, rough, crooked, but functional. Doyun dug them into the 4th field, filled them with rusty water. The water went down, slowly. He waited an hour. Then he placed his palm on it. The panel flashed. The mana at the depth began to decrease, not quickly, but surely. He smiled. It worked. He did this every day, morning and evening. He filled the pipes with iron water. He watched the panel. The mana was draining away, percentage by percentage. After 2 weeks, the pH of the 4th field rose to 4.2. Another month, and it would be ready for planting. At the end of the 3rd month, what he had been waiting for happened, and what he had feared. At night, Tae woke him up, shaking his shoulder. Eyes wide, face pale, he said one word. People. Behind the wall. Doyun went out. The wall was 2/3 complete. On the north side, a palisade of thin logs still stood. Temporary. Kang Jae stood at the gate with a knife. Beyond the gate, torches burned in the darkness. Doyun approached. He peered through a crack. 12 men, on horseback, with swords, torches in their hands. At the front, a man in chainmail, his face covered with a scarf. Bandits. Doyun stood in the darkness and counted. 12, on horseback, armed. He had 60 able-bodied men. 2 of them had combat experience, Kang Jae and the old man Hong Pyo. No weapons, no swords, just sickles and hoes. Against mounted swordsmen, that's nothing. Kang Jae approached. He whispered that they didn't yet know how many people were in the village, that they couldn't see the wall at night. They think the village is small and defenseless. Doyun thought, quickly. Then he turned to Kang Jae. He told him to do 2 things. First, light all the torches on the wall, all of them, all along the perimeter, so that from the outside it would look like a city, not a village. Second, lead the boars to the gates. Kang Jae blinked. Then he understood and grinned. A minute later, the wall burst into flames. 20 torches, all along its length. A dark mass stirred down by the gate. 4 boars emerged from the shadows, the male in front, huge, black. His fangs gleamed white in the torchlight. The bandits returned in 3 weeks, not 12, 32. Doyun found out about it a day later. Tae came to him in the morning. He said the north wind smelled of horses, many horses. Doyun believed him. He hadn't doubted Tae in a long time. He called a council meeting. The elder, Kang Jae, Yoon Mei, Lee Na, So Rin. 5 people in the elder's house gathered around an oil lamp. Kang Jae spoke plainly. 30 mounted swordsmen. The wall is 3/4 complete. The northern section is still weak. No militia, no weapons. If they launch an assault, they'll breach the northern wall in half an hour. Doyun listened. Then he asked what the raiders wanted warriors. Kang Jae said food, grain, maybe people to sell into slavery, but first and foremost, food. This isn't an army. These are hungry people with swords. Doyun nodded. Hungry people with swords. He knew what to do with them. He said they wouldn't fight. The elder looked at him as if he were crazy. Kang Jae frowned. Yoon Mei clenched her fist around the handle of her hammer. Doyun raised his hand. He explained. The bandits are hungry. That is their weakness. A hungry man thinks with his stomach. If you show him food, he forgets about his sword. Du Yong proposed a plan. Tomorrow morning he would go out to them alone, unarmed, with a pot of rice. The elder said it was suicide. Kang Jae said he agreed with the elder. Doyun looked at Kang Jae. He asked how many of his former army comrades had deserted because of hunger. Kang Jae fell silent. Then he answered quietly, half. Doyun nodded. He said that these bandits weren't villains, they were former peasants. Former soldiers, former people. It wasn't cruelty that turned them into bandits, but hunger. And if you offered them what they had fled from into the forest, they would lay down their swords. Not all of them, but enough. Kang Jae looked at him for a long time. Then he said he would go with him, from behind, with a knife, just in case. Doyun agreed. He stood before the gates, alone, in work clothes, in dirty boots. A cauldron stood on the ground before him. A large one, cast iron. Rice was steaming inside it, fresh, hot. The scent wafted through the morning air. The bandit stood 100 paces away, 32 men, on horseback, with swords. The leader in front, the same man in chainmail. He was looking at Doyun, at the cauldron, at the steam rising in the cold morning air. Doyun didn't move. He stood and waited. The leader urged his horse forward, rode up to within 20 paces, stopped, asked who he was. Doyun replied that he was a farmer. The leader snorted, asked why he had come out. Doyun said he had brought breakfast. He pointed to the pot, said it was hot rice, for everyone. If they wanted, they could eat. Then we'd talk. The leader was silent. His men stirred behind him. Doyun saw their faces, thin, gray, dirty, hungry eyes. They weren't looking at him, at the pot. The leader dismounted. He walked over to the pot. He looked inside. Rice, white, fluffy, hot. The leader looked up at Doyun, asked if there was any poison. Doyun took a bowl, scooped some up, ate 3 spoonfuls, swallowed, showed him the empty bowl. The leader watched. Then he removed the scarf from his face. Young, about 25, a scar on his cheek. Tired eyes. Not angry, tired. He shouted to his men. The bandits dismounted. They approached, one after another. Doyun handed out the rice, silently, bowl after bowl. The men ate standing up, quickly, greedily, burning their tongues. One guy, about 17, ate so fast that rice spilled down his chin. Another finished and quietly asked for more. Doyun gave it to him. When the pot was empty, the leader sat on the ground. His sword lay nearby. He stared at his empty bowl. Doyun sat across from him. He asked where they were from. The leader answered, "The village of Stonebrook. It used to be there. The landlord took the land for debts. He drove the people out. They went into the forest. At first they hunted. Then there was nothing left to hunt. They turned to looting, not out of desire, out of desperation." Doyun listened. Then he said he had a proposal: land, work, food, shelter. In exchange, they would lay down their swords and take up hoes. 32 men, that's 64 hands. With them, he'll harvest a 4th field in a month, and a 4th field means 30 more sacks by winter. 30 sacks means life for 200 people. The leader looked at him for a long time, silently. Then he glanced back at his men. 31 men. They were all looking at him, waiting. The chieftain turned to Doyun. He said he had a condition, that his men would work, but if anyone from the village harmed his men, he would personally gut the offender. Doyun nodded. He said that in his village there were no us and them. There were those who worked and ate. The leader held out his hand. Doyun shook it. The handshake was firm. His name was Jeong Hae-min, a former hunter, a former bandit, now a farmer. 32 men entered Pumpkin Ford, with swords on their backs and empty bowls in their hands. The village froze. 160 people stared at the 32 armed strangers. Strangers. The tension hung like a storm cloud. Kang Jae stood at the gate with a knife in his belt, hand on the hilt, face like stone. Doyun stepped between them. He spoke loudly. "These people have come to work. They are ours, starting today. Anyone who objects, speak now." Silence. The elder stepped forward. He looked at the leader, at his men. Then he took out his pipe, lit it, took a drag, exhaled the smoke. And he said that if the legendary farmer says they're ours, then they're ours. And anyone who's unhappy can discuss it with the boors at the gate. The tension broke. Not completely, but enough. The former bandits were given a place on the south side of the village. Separate houses, a separate well, but a shared pot. Doyun insisted. One kitchen, one pot. Everyone eats together. If you eat from the same pot, it's hard to see each other as strangers. The first few days were tough. The villagers eyed them askance. The former bandits walked around with swords and trusted no one. Minor skirmishes. A shove in the line for water. A wrong look. A word said out of turn. Kang Ji settled 3 conflicts in the first week. With his fists and his words. Doyun settled one. In his own way. One of the villagers, Park Song-ho, the eldest of the brothers, ran into a former bandit at the well. Word for word. Park said he wouldn't drink from the same well as bandits. The bandit grabbed his sword. Doyun happened to be nearby. He stepped between them. He looked at Park. He asked quietly, "Have you eaten today?" Park blinked. He said he had. Doyun asked if he remembered that 2 months ago he too had been hungry. That 2 months ago, Pumpkin Ford was just as poor a village as all the rest, that this man with the sword was just as much a peasant as Park, and that the difference between them was 2 months and a single sack of rice. Park was silent. Then he lowered his eyes. He stepped away. He didn't apologize, but he didn't fight back either. That was enough. By the end of the first week, the former bandits were working in the fourth field. The swords stood in the corner of the warehouse. Hoes were in their hands. Jung Hae-min turned out to be a good organizer. He divided his men into groups of 5. Each group of 5 was responsible for its own section. They worked quickly, roughly, but effectively, a soldier's habit. Doyun showed them how to plow, how to apply ash, how to water. They learned quickly. The hungry learned faster than the well-fed. 2 weeks later, the fourth field was plowed. Green manure was planted. Iron-rich water was poured into the drainage pipes. The pH began to rise, slowly but surely. Doyun stood at the edge and looked out at the 4 fields. The first was harvested. The stubble was golden. The second was ripening, rice up to his waist. The third was a patchwork of pumpkins and beans. The fourth was green with green manure. 4 fields. 2 months ago, there wasn't a single one. He looked at the panel. The experience bar had passed the second mark, level 3, and a new line appeared in the list of abilities. Tamed fields, rank 2. Radius increased. Beasts bound to the farm sensed danger from a mile away. He closed the panel. He looked at the settlement. The walls were almost finished. The northern section was being completed this week. 4 boars lay by the gate. The water wheel of the new mill clattered on the river. Yoon Mei had finished it 3 days ago. The first batch of flour had already been ground, so Rin had baked flatbreads from it. Real ones, not made from bark, from flour. Doyun came down the hill and walked toward the gate. So Rin was coming toward him. She was carrying his dinner, a flatbread and a bowl of bean porridge. He took it. He looked at her. She had lost even more weight, despite his words that she should eat. Doyun set the bowl on the ground. He broke the flatbread in half. He held out one half to her.
So Rin shook her head. He didn't take his hand back. He stood there and waited. She looked into his eyes. There was no plea in his gaze. There was a demand. Quiet, warm, but a demand. She took the half. They ate standing by the gate, side by side, in silence. A male boar raised his head, looked at them, snorted, and dropped his head back onto his paws. Toward the end of the 4th month, a woman arrived in Pumpkin Ford who changed everything. Doyun was in the 4th field when Tae ran up, out of breath. He said there was a woman standing at the gate with 2 swords, tall, frightening, not moving, just standing there. Doyun walked toward the gate. Kang Ji was already there, hand on his knife, face tense. Standing outside the gate was a woman, tall, broad-shouldered, a scar across her left eyebrow, 2 swords crossed on her back, clothes in tatters, face gray with hunger, eyes dead. Not evil, dead. The eyes of a person who doesn't care. Doyun stepped out beyond the gate. Kang Ji followed. Doyun stopped him with a hand. He approached the woman. He asked who she was. The woman looked right through him. Then she answered in an even voice, without inflection. Kang So-ah,
Former corporal of the 3rd Company of the Central Province's Army, a deserter, on the run for a year, heard that they were feeding people at Pumpkin Ford, came. Doyun looked at her sunken cheeks, at her arms, which hung limply at her sides like whips, at the swords on her back, which she hadn't taken off, not because she was threatening him, because it was the only thing she had left. He asked when she had last eaten. Soa thought for a moment. Then she said she didn't remember. Maybe 3 days ago, maybe 4. Some berries in the forest. Doyun turned toward the gate. He called out to So Rin. He asked for a bowl and a flatbread. So Rin brought them. Quickly, she looked at the woman at the gate, at the swords, at the scar, at the dead eyes, and she handed over the food in silence. Soa took the bowl. She looked at the rice, then at Doyun, then at the rice, and she began to eat, slowly, mechanically, like a person who had forgotten how to taste. Doyun sat next to her on the ground and waited. When the bowl was empty, Soa set it down on the ground. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand and said quietly, she said the rice was good. Doyun nodded. Soa fell silent. Then she asked what he wanted in exchange for the food. She wouldn't work in the fields. She didn't know how. She didn't want to. All she knew how to do was kill. Doyun replied that he needed someone who knew how to defend warehouses, walls, people. That Kang Jae was a good soldier, but alone. That the village had 200 residents and 4 fields full of grain, and that every month there would be food. Soa listened. Then she asked how much he paid. Doyun said he paid with food, 3 times a day, a roof over one's head, and one thing that money can't buy. Soa raised an eyebrow. What was it? Doyun said a place to stay. Soa looked at him. Her dead eyes fluttered slightly, for a second, then they went blank again. She nodded, stood up, walked through the gate. Kang Jae stepped aside. Soa surveyed the walls, the gate, the watchtowers, the boars at the entrance. She walked the entire perimeter in an hour. She returned to Doyun. She said the north wall was weak, that the watchtowers were positioned incorrectly, that the moat was too shallow, that the gate had no bolt.
And that boars were fine, but boars wouldn't stop a cavalry unit of 50 swordsmen. Doyun listened. He nodded. Then he asked if she could fix it. So-A said she could, if he gave her men. Doyun gave her 20. 10 of Jong Hae-min's former bandits, 10 villagers. So-A didn't bother getting to know them. She just went out in the morning and started giving orders. Her voice was steady, quiet, no shouting, but the men obeyed. There was something about her, a weight, not a threat, the weight of a stone, which you don't need to throw to make everyone understand that it's heavy. In a week, she rebuilt the northern section of the wall, deepened the moat by an elbow's length, rearranged the watchtowers, put a bolt on the gate, dug 3 pit traps on the northern approaches. Kang Jae watched her work and nodded. He approached Doyun. He said that this woman knew her business, that she wasn't a corporal, she was a centurion, maybe higher. Doyun wasn't surprised. She lived in the house at the very end by the wall, alone. She spoke to no one except on business. She ate alone. She slept little. At night she walked along the walls, checking the posts. People were afraid of her, not because of cruelty, because of the emptiness, because of her dead eyes. Doyun watched. On the 3rd day, he noticed that Soa didn't eat meat. Jong Hae-min had shot a deer in the forest. In the evening, they grilled the meat in the square. Everyone ate. Soa sat off to the side, with an empty bowl. Doyun sat down next to her. He asked why she wasn't eating. Soa was silent. Then she said briefly, she couldn't. Ever since she left the army. Meat smells like blood, and blood smells like war. Doyun didn't press her for details. He nodded. He stood up. He left. The next day, he went to Young May's smithy. He asked her to forge a mortar, a small one, for grain. Young May asked why. He said he wanted to make soy mince. Young May looked at him as if he were crazy. She said soy is porridge, not mince. Doyun explained. The beans he'd grown contained so much protein that you could make a substance similar to meat out of them. In taste, in texture, in hardiness. You had to soak them, grind them, squeeze them, heat them, shape them, fry them. Young May forged the mortar, in a day. A small one, heavy, perfect. Doyun spent the evening in the kitchen, soaking the beans, grinding them, squeezing them through a cloth, kneading, shaping, frying on a stone. The result was patties, dense, brown, smelling not quite like meat, but close, very close. He carried them to the house at the end of the street. He set them down in front of Soa's door. He knocked and left. He didn't wait. He didn't look back. He just left. In the morning, the bowl was sitting on the threshold, empty. Doyun took it away. He brought a new one that evening. 3 days later, Soa came to him. She stood on the threshold. She was silent. Then she asked what it was. Doyun said it was soy meat, beans from his field, protein like beef. The taste is similar. No blood. Soa stood there. Her face didn't change, but her hands. He saw her hands. The fingers that had held 2 swords without a tremor. Those fingers were trembling now.
She said one word, "Thank you," and she left. Doyun watched her go. That evening, he told Sorin about the soy meat. He asked her to cook it for everyone. Sorin tasted it. She nodded. She started making it. A week later, the soy patties became part of the regular menu. People ate them with pleasure. Not meat, but filling. And they didn't have to spend time hunting.
Li Na came to him with a question. She asked how the beans from his field could contain so much protein. Ordinary beans can't do that. Doyun thought for a moment. Then he spoke honestly. He said that his class was improving the seeds. Each generation was better than the last. More protein, more nutrients, more resilience. He doesn't control it completely. The class does it on its own. But he sets the direction. If he thinks about protein when he plants the beans, they grow with protein. If he thinks about vitamins, they grow with vitamins. Li Na listened. Then she said quietly that it was scary. Doyun asked why. She replied that it was because if someone finds out, they'll want to take it. Not the sacks, him. Doyun said nothing, because she was right. Around the same time, the first sprouts broke through in the fourth field. Rice. Fast rice. Grade 2. Maturation. 52 days. Yield. Plus 60%. The field was huge. Twice the size of the first one. If all goes well, that's 40 sacks by early winter. 40 sacks plus 30 from the second and third fields. 70 in total. Minus 15 for the official. 55 for 200 people. With the pumpkins and beans, it would last until spring. For the first time in 4 months, Doyun thought that they might not just survive, they might live. He stood on the hill and looked at the settlement. Walls, 4 fields, a mill on the river, smoke from the chimneys, people in the streets, boars at the gates. 200 people who 4 months ago were as good as dead, who had been eating bark and dying, who had laughed at the farmer. Now they were building walls and harvesting crops and eating 3 times a day, and their children weren't crying from hunger at night. He had done it, not with a sword, not with magic, with his hands, with knowledge, with the earth. He sat down on the grass, closed his eyes, and for the first time he allowed himself to think about what he hadn't thought about since his arrival. About home. About his grandfather's field in Choya. About the scent of rice in the wind. About how his grandfather used to say that the earth won't deceive you if you don't deceive it. And about how his grandfather would have approved. So Rin found him on the hill in the evening. He was sitting with his eyes closed. She sat down beside him, silently, for a long time. Then she rested her head on his shoulder. He didn't move. She didn't move. The wind carried the scent of pumpkins from the third field. Somewhere below, the fool Tay was playing the flute, and on the horizon, the Beth, red, huge, like a pumpkin from his field. Winter came early. The first frost struck in the 6th month. Doyun went out in the morning and saw the white ground. Hoarfrost had settled on the stubble of the first field, on the pumpkin leaves, on the roofs of the houses. The cold seeped under his clothes. He breathed in, and steam came out of his mouth. The 4th field had made it. The rice had been harvested a week before the frost. 43. More than he had expected. Rank 2 didn't let him down. There were 71 sacks of rice in the warehouses in total, plus the pumpkins, plus the beans, plus the corn, plus the flour from the mill. Doyun did the math. It would be enough for 200 people until spring. Not a lavish amount, but enough. He locked the warehouses. So Rin to So Rin. She didn't ask why it was hers. She just took it and hung it around her neck under her shirt. The first 2 weeks of winter passed quietly. People worked inside the walls. They repaired houses. They insulated the walls with clay and straw. Yun Mei forged tools. Li Na dried herbs for the winter. So A led the militiamen on the walls. 20 men. A mix of former bandits and villagers' folk mixed together, with spears that Yun Mei had forged from old iron. Not swords, but enough for defending the walls. Kang Jae trained them every day. Formation, shield to shield, spear forward, simple techniques, peasant ones. But 20 men behind a wall with spears, that's no longer a village, that's a garrison. Before Yoon, he had prepared for winter differently. He knew that winter would bring more than just cold. Winter would bring the northern horde. He had heard about them from every refugee, nomads with steppe wolves. They were coming from the north, village after village, burning fields, abducting people, not for the sake of cruelty, for the sake of food. In winter, the steppe offers no sustenance, and the horde was heading south in search of food. And Pumpkin Ford, with its warehouses, was the richest target for 100 miles around. Doyun called a council. Everyone came. The elder, Kang Jae, So A, Yoon Mei, Lee Na, So Rin, Jong Hae Min. He spread a map out on the table, a rough one, drawn with charcoal on bark, but accurate. Tae helped. He knew every trail, every hill, every stream. Doyun pointed on the map. Pumpkin Ford, 4 fields, the wall, the river to the south, the forest to the west, the hills to the east, an open plain to the north. The plain is a problem. The horde's cavalry will sweep across it like a knife through butter. The wall won't stop them. It'll delay them for an hour, maybe 2, but it won't stop them. Soa nodded. She agreed. She asked what he proposed. Doyun said he proposed not fighting. The council froze. He explained, "The horde is coming for food. If there is no food, they will leave. So we need to make sure there is no food, in plain sight." He laid out the plan. First, move all supplies to underground storage. Dig cellars beneath the warehouses, deep ones, dry ones, with ventilation. Camouflage them. Leave empty sacks up top. Second, burn the stubble in the fields, ourselves, before the horde arrives, so the fields look dead. Third, take the people who can't fight across the river, into the forest, with a 10-day supply of food. Fourth, leave 40 people in the village, militia and boars. And wait, the elder said the plan was insane, that burning our own fields is suicide. Doyun said that stubble isn't fields. The roots are intact, the soil is intact. Everything will grow back in the spring. And if we don't burn the stubble, the horde will see that the land here yields crops. And they'll return in the spring with an army twice as large. We need them to leave thinking this place is empty, that there's nothing to take here. So A listened, silently. Then she said the plan might work. But one detail was needed. The horde had to enter the village, see the empty warehouses, empty houses, empty fields, and leave on their own. Do-young nodded. Exactly. Kang Ji said that to do this, they had to open the gates, voluntarily, let the enemy in. Do-young said yes. The council was silent for a long time. Then the elder knocked on the pipe. He said he had trusted the farmer once. He didn't regret it. He would trust him a second time. The preparations took 2 weeks. Cho Dae-ho and his crew dug cellars, day and night. The frozen ground was hard to break through, but their hands didn't stop. Do-yoon figured out a way. He poured hot water onto the frozen ground, waited for it to thaw, dug, poured again, slowly but surely. 3 cellars were ready in 10 days, deep, dry, with wooden walls, ventilated through pipes made from hollow tree trunks. They moved the sacks overnight, all 71 of them. Pumpkins, beans, corn, flour, everything went underground. We laid boards on top, covered them with earth, trampled it down, placed empty barrels and torn sacks on top, a scene of desolation. The fields were burned on the 12th day. Do-yoon set the stubble ablaze himself. He stood and watched as the fire spread across his fields, across the land he had brought to life with his own hands, which he read like a book, which had come to know him. The fire devoured the dry stalks. Black smoke rose into the sky. The earth turned black, but the roots were deep, alive. The fire couldn't reach them. In the spring, everything would return. So Rin stood beside him. She watched the fire. Her face was stony. She didn't cry, but her hand found his and squeezed so hard her knuckles turned white. On the 14th day, Tae ran up. His face was pale. His voice was breaking. He said dust was coming from the north. Lots of dust. Horses. Wolves. A horde. Doyun didn't hesitate. An order went out through the village. Women, children, and the elderly were to go through the south gate to the river and into the forest. So Rin led the way. Li Na was with her. A 10-day supply of food had already been gathered. So Rin walked up to him. She looked him in the eyes. She didn't ask him to stay. She didn't ask him to go with her. She just looked. Then she turned and led the people away. 160 people. Women carrying children in their arms, old people leaning on sticks, Yumi with her child, Doyun's mother, the old woman Bon's son, everyone. They went across the river into the forest and disappeared among the trees. 40 people remained in the village. Soa and Kang Ji were in command. 20 militiamen on the walls, 20 in reserve, spears on their backs. Their faces were ashen, their hands were shaking. Peasants aren't soldiers, but they stood their ground. Because beyond the wall lay their fields, their homes, their lives. Yun Mei stayed behind too. Doyun told her to leave. She looked at him. She said her forge was here. Her anvil is here. Her work is here. And if he thinks she'll drop her hammer and run into the forest, then he's even dumber than he looks. Doyun didn't argue. The horde appeared by evening. Tae counted from the watchtower. 200 horsemen, 50 foot soldiers, 30 steppe wolves on chains, tents on sleds. This wasn't a gang, it was a tribe, with women and children in the supply train. They hadn't come to plunder, they'd come to spend the winter. Doyun stood on the wall and watched, with Soa by his side, calm as a rock, 2 swords at her back. She said quietly that there were 250 warriors plus the wolves, against 40 peasants with spears. No chance. Doyun nodded, said that's why they wouldn't fight. At dawn, he ordered the gates opened. The guards retreated behind the houses, hid. The village looked empty, doors open. The wind whipped dust through the streets, warehouses wide open, empty sacks on the floor. The horde entered cautiously. Cavalry patrols rode through the streets. They peered into every house, empty. They checked the warehouses, empty. They went out into the fields, black, scorched earth. Nothing. The horde's chieftain rode into the village around noon. A large man on a shaggy horse, a wolf fur coat, a weather-beaten, eyes like slits. He surveyed the settlement, the warehouses, the fields, and cursed. Empty. They had walked for 5 days across the steppe, through blizzards, through freezing cold, following rumors of a village with food, and they had come to an empty place. The horde stayed for 3 days. They searched. They dug up the ground. They tapped on the walls, but the cellars were deep and well camouflaged. Cho De-ho knew his business. On the 4th day, the chieftain gathered the people. They were leaving. To the southwest, to other villages, less cunning ones. Doyun watched from a hill across the river, with Soa by his side. There were no binoculars, but Soa's eyes were like a hawk's. She was counting. 200 are leaving, 50 remain. The supply train, the wounded, the sick, women with children. They set up camp outside the village, on an open plain, without walls, without shelter, in the wind. Doyun looked at their camp, at the tents made of torn hides, at the smoke from the fires, at the small figures huddling close to the fire. Children. There were children there. Soa said they had to wait. When the main horde had gone far away, then they could return. Doyun nodded. Then he fell silent. He looked at the camp, at the children. Then he said he would wait 5 days. When the main horde had gone beyond the horizon, he would go out to the ones left behind. Soa turned to him. Her dead eyes came alive for a second. She asked if he was serious. Doyun said he was serious. 50 starving people, women, children, the wounded. They would freeze to death in a week or die of starvation. Soa said they were enemies, that they had come to take his grain. Doyun replied quietly. He said they weren't enemies. They were hungry, just like everyone who had come to him before them. The bandits had been enemies too. Now they were building a wall. Soa was silent. Then she said he was either a saint or an idiot, and that he was more likely an idiot. But she fell silent and didn't argue. On the 5th day, the main horde disappeared over the horizon. Doyun returned to the village. He opened the cellars. The supplies were intact. All 71 sacks, pumpkins, beans, everything was there. He summoned So-rin and the people from the forest. They returned by evening, alive, frozen, but alive. Doyun's mother hugged him and didn't let go for a long time. So-rin didn't hug him. She just stood beside him. She looked at him. He could see she hadn't slept for all 5 days. Dark circles, pale lips, cracks on her hands from the cold. He took her hands. He breathed on them. She flinched. She froze. She stood there and watched as he warmed her hands with his breath. The next morning, Doyun went out to the horde's camp, alone, with a pot of rice, just like back then with the bandits. 50 men in tattered tents. They saw him and grabbed their weapons. He set down the pot. He opened the lid. Steam rose into the cold air. The smell of rice drifted across the plain. An old woman from the camp approached first. A child followed her, then a wounded warrior leaning on his spear. They ate, in silence, crouching on the frozen ground. Doyun sat nearby and waited. When the pot was empty, he spoke through gestures because he didn't know the language of the horde. He pointed to the settlement, to the walls, to the smoke from the chimneys. He pointed to his mouth, food. He pointed to the roof, shelter. He pointed to his hands, work. The old woman looked at him. Then she spoke in broken language of the kingdom. She said they were not slaves, that they were warriors. Doyun shook his head. He pointed to the field, blackened by fire. Then he pointed to the ground beneath his feet. He scooped up a handful, squeezed it. He opened his hand. He showed that the earth was alive, that it would be green here in the spring, and that he needed hands, any hands. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Through the old woman who knew the language, of the 50 people, 32 agreed to enter the settlement. 18 went south after the main horde. 32 remained. Among them were 6 women, 8 children, 6 wounded warriors, and 2 steppe wolves. The wolves did not leave their masters. The winter was harsh. The frost held for 3 weeks. Snow piled up to waist height against the walls. People stayed indoors. They burned firewood. They were conserving supplies. Doyun had rationed the provisions for 4 months, a handful per person. So Rin kept watch. Every morning she opened the cellar, measured out the rations, closed it, the key around her neck. Her face calm, her hands precise. She never made a mistake. Doyun watched her and thought that if there had been a woman like her in his past life, he wouldn't have fallen asleep at the wheel on the 3rd day of planting, because she wouldn't have let him. Winter wasn't just about the cold. Winter was about people. 230 people in a cramped settlement behind the walls. Villagers, refugees, former bandits, former nomads. 5 groups that didn't trust each other. The first month passed in skirmishes, minor ones, everyday ones. The nomads cooked their food differently. They smelled different. They spoke differently. The children fought. The adults argued. Kanjay broke it up, so A restored order with a single glance. But these were just band-aid solutions, Doyun thought. Then he did what he did best. He started setting up a communal table every evening, 1 big pot, in the square. Rice and beans and squash and flatbreads. Everyone ate together. Everyone. Nomads next to villagers. Former bandits next to the elderly. Children mixed in. The first week, people sat in groups, each with their own kind. Doyun didn't push them. He just placed the pot in the center. 1. And to get to the food, you had to walk past strangers. By the 2nd week, the children had mixed together. Children are always the first. A boy from the nomads sat next to Yumi's daughter. He showed her a wooden wolf. She showed him a rag doll. By the 3rd week, the mothers sat next to each other.
The nomad woman Alton sat next to Yu Mi. They didn't talk. They just ate, side by side. Then Alton passed Yu Mi a bowl with seconds. Yu Mi nodded. By the fourth week, everyone was sitting together. Do-Yun stood off to the side and watched. It was working. Slowly, through the stomach, but it worked. People who eat from the same pot cease to be strangers. It's not magic, it's biology. Eating together is the oldest ritual of trust, older than any rite, older than any prayer. Grandfather in Choya used to say, "Feed a man and you will know him." Because people don't lie at the table. By midwinter, the communal table had become a ritual, every evening, without exception. Tay played the flute. Old woman Bon Sun sang, softly, in a hoarse voice, old songs that no one remembered anymore. The nomads listened. They didn't understand the words, but they understood the melody. One evening, Alton sang in reply, in her own language, a different melody, different words, but the same longing, the same pain, the same hope. Two voices in the square, two languages, one feeling. The people listened. They were silent. And in that silence, something shifted, something heavy and ancient. The wall between friends and strangers cracked. It didn't collapse, it cracked. But a crack is a beginning. That same winter, what Do-Yun had been waiting for and fearing happened. One night, So-Rin couldn't sleep. She lay beside him, breathing unevenly. Do-Yun turned. He looked at her in the dark. He asked quietly what was wrong. So-Rin was silent. Then she spoke, quietly, like someone who had been gathering their words for a long time and had finally made up their mind. She said she knew. She knew he was different, that the husband she had known for 2 years couldn't have known what he knew, couldn't speak like that, couldn't look like that, couldn't do what he does. She said the old Do-Yun was quiet, kind, weak. She loved him, the way one loves the weak, with pity and tenderness. But this Do-Yun isn't weak. This one knows. He acts. He builds. He feeds 230 people. He tames beasts. He speaks to the earth. And she loves him too. More intensely, more terrifyingly. But she doesn't know who he is, and that torments her every night. Do-Yun lay there and listened. Darkness, silence, his wife's breathing nearby. He thought about what to say. He couldn't tell the truth, the whole truth, that he was from another world, that the old Do-Yun was dead, that his soul had come from outside. She wouldn't understand, and if she did understand, she would break. He said something else. He said that on the day of the ritual, when the class lit up above his head, something changed within him, something awoke. Knowledge, memory, understanding. He doesn't know where it came from. Maybe from the class, maybe from the gods, maybe from the earth. But he is still Do-Yun, his mother's son, So-Rin's husband, the man who lies next to her every night, and who will never leave. So-Rin was silent. He could feel her thinking, weighing things, trying his words against her pain. Then she moved closer, resting her head on his chest, and spoke softly. Said she didn't care where it came from, as long as he was there. He hugged her, held her close, and lay like that until morning. He didn't sleep. He listened to her breathing, steady, calm. For the first time in months. By the end of winter, the settlement had changed. It was no longer a village, 4 streets, a square, a blacksmith shop, a mill, warehouses, a bakery. Li Na opened a medical clinic, so Rin kept track of supplies. Yun Mei forged day and night, so Ah trained the militia. Kang Jae built. Zhang He Min oversaw the work in the fields. Tay kept an eye on the weather, everyone in their place, everyone needed. Do-Yun looked at it all and realized he hadn't built a farm, he had built a town. Small, rough, poor, but alive. And when the first spring rain fell on the black fields and the earth swelled and smelled of dampness and life, he stepped outside the wall. He stood in the first field. He placed his palm on the ground. The panel lit up. pH 6.1. Dead mana, 0. The soil was healthy, for the first time in 10 years. He closed his eyes, clenched a handful of wet earth, and whispered in Korean, "Thank you." The spring of the second year began what winter had sown. Rumors. They spread faster than the wind. Merchants who stopped by for flour took away more than just sacks. They took away stories about a village where the dead earth had come back to life, about a farmer who fed 200 people from 4 fields, about rice that ripened in 2 months, about boars and wolves that guarded the walls. Each story grew richer with details. By summer, the whole province knew about pumpkin broth. By the end of summer, 3 provinces knew of it. The merchants were the first to arrive. A caravan from the provincial capital. 6 carts, 20 guards. A merchant named Han Doyun, fat, with oily eyes, with a purse on his belt that jingled with every step. He came to see the miracle rice and, if he was lucky, buy a sack or 2. Doyun met him at the gate, showed him around the fields, showed him the rice, the pumpkins, the beans, the corn, the mill, the bakery. The merchant watched. His oily eyes grew wider and wider. He felt the ears of grain, tasted the kernels. He tasted the flour. He tasted the bread from the bakery, and offered a price. 10 silver coins per sack. The market price is 15. Doyun said 20. The merchant choked. He said that for 20 he could buy 2 sacks in the capital. Doyun nodded. He said that in the capital the rice is ordinary, but his rice ripens twice as fast. It yields twice the harvest, and it tastes like nothing else in this kingdom. If the merchant brings it to the capital, he'll sell it for 30. The merchant did the math. Then he nodded. 20, but 10 sacks. Doyun agreed. 10 sacks for 200 silver, the first real money of Pumpkin Ford. With it, Doyun bought cloth from the caravan, iron ingots, salt, common wheat seeds for comparative planting, and one thing he'd been looking for a long time: mountain crystal. 3 pieces, cloudy, uneven, but transparent enough. He took them to Yunmei. She looked at the stones, asked why. Doyun pulled a piece of bark with a drawing from behind his belt. Glasses, 2 lenses, polished, in a thin iron frame, on a string behind the ears. Yunmei turned the blueprint over in her hands. Her eyes lit up. She had never cut a stone before, but her hands knew precision, knew the shape, knew patience. She took the crystal and went into the smithy for 3 days. The glasses were ready on the 4th day. Rough, heavy, the lenses uneven, but convex, magnifying. Doyun tried them on. The world became a bit blurry, but larger. He took them off, adjusted the blueprint. Yunmei remade them. Another day. The second version was better. The lenses were thinner, smoother. Doyun knew they weren't perfect, but for a man who had ruined his eyesight over 10 years reading scrolls by candlelight, they would be a miracle. He put the glasses in a small bag and waited. He didn't have to wait long. In the 3rd week of summer, a woman arrived in the village, pale, quiet, in a gray monk's robe, with a sack of scrolls on her back. With Yunji, 25 years old, a nun from the Temple of the Sleeping Grain. She came alone, on foot, across 3 provinces, because she had heard a story from a pilgrim that she simply had to verify. A story about a farmer who does what is described in the temple's forbidden scrolls. Doyun met her in the square. She stood there, gazing at the fields beyond the wall, squinting. Her eyesight was poor. She could make out the outlines, but not the details. 12 years of reading by candlelight in dark cells. She asked quietly. She asked if it was true that he revives dead land, cleanses mana from the soil, grows rice in 2 lunar cycles. Doyun said it was true. Yunji took a scroll out of her bag, unrolled it. Old, fragile. The letters faded. She said it was a text from the forbidden archives of the Temple of the Sleeping Grain. It was 300 years old, written the year before the Great Drought. It described the ritual of the farmer priests of the H clan, a clan that controlled the manna in the earth, that could make the soil bear fruit or die, that 300 years ago had upset the balance and caused the drought. Doyun froze. The Han clan, his clan. Eun-ji continued. She said that the scroll contained a prophecy. When the last of the Han clan attained the farmer class, the curse would begin to weaken. But only if the class holder cultivated the land of his own free will, with his own hands, without coercion. Every field cleared by his hands lifts a portion of the curse, but complete removal requires a price. Doyun asked what it was. Eun-ji looked up. She squinted, trying to make out his face. She said that the scroll uses a term she doesn't fully understand. The name on the grain, the ability to grow a crop tailored to a specific person. Each such grain takes a year of the farmer's life. To lift the curse from the entire South, one must grow the name on the grain for the land itself. For the continent, it costs more than a year. It costs a great deal. Doyun stood and listened. The wind ruffled the hem of his shirt. Somewhere behind his back, a mill was clattering. Children were laughing in the square. He asked how much. Eun-ji shook her head. She said the scroll was damaged. The exact price was illegible. Maybe 3 years, maybe 5, maybe more. Doyun nodded. Then he pulled a small pouch from his belt. He handed it to her. Eun-ji opened it. She took out a pair of glasses. She turned them over. She didn't understand. He took them gently, put them on her face, adjusted the strings behind her ears. Eun-ji froze. The world around her changed. Blurred outlines became sharp. She saw his face, clearly for the first time. She saw the lines of the fields beyond the wall. She saw the grains in the ears of wheat. She saw the faces of the people in the square. She saw the letters on the scroll she had been reading by touch for 12 years. She slowly sat down on the ground, right on the dusty square. She took off her glasses, put them back on, took them off, put them on. She looked at her hands, at the lines on her palms, at her nails, at her skin. She saw her hands, for the first time in years, clearly, down to the details. She sat on the ground and was silent, for a long time, until Yoon sat down beside her. He didn't rush her. Then she turned to him. Her eyes behind the lenses were huge, wet. She said she would stay, that the scrolls needed to be deciphered, that he needed her and she needed the scrolls, and that no one had ever needed her in her whole life. But now she was needed, and it made it hard for her to breathe. Doyun nodded. Eun-ji moved into a room next to the warehouse. She laid out the scrolls. She worked day and night. She didn't even take off her glasses while sleeping. A week later, she came to him with news. She had deciphered the second scroll. It contained a detailed description of the Han clan, farmer priests, keepers of the mana balance, 12 generations. The last priest broke the taboo. He tried to grow a harvest for the entire continent at once. He drew too much mana from the depths. Mana surged to the surface. It scorched the fields. Drought. 3 centuries. A curse. And the only way back is through a descendant who will correct the ancestor's mistake. Not by force, by labor. Field by field. Grain by grain. The summer of the second year changed the scale. The alliance of 7 villages was not born on the battlefield. It was born at the table. Doyun invited the elders of 6 neighboring villages to a feast. Not a big one, not lavish, just food. Rice, pumpkin, beans, bread, so-rin flatbreads, Li-na's herbal tea, all from his fields. The elders arrived, 6 old men on skinny horses, with hungry faces and suspicious eyes. Doyun seated them at the table, fed them. He didn't say a word about business, he just fed them, for 2 hours, in silence. When the last bowl was empty, the oldest of the 6 raised his head. He asked what Doyun wanted. Doyun answered. He said he wanted their villages not to die. He proposed a deal. He would give each village fast-growing rice seeds. He would provide plow blueprints. He would give mountain sorrel to clear the land. He would teach them for free. In exchange for one thing, each village would send 5 people to Pumpkin Ford for training, for a month. They would learn to work the land. They would return home. They would cultivate their fields. And in the fall, each village would give Pumpkin Ford 5 sacks of rice. Not a tribute, payment for the training and the seeds. The elders did the math. 5 people for a month, 5 sacks in the fall. Compared to the alternative, that their villages would die out by winter, there was nothing to think about. All 6 agreed. A week later, 30 people arrived in Pumpkin Ford, 5 from each village. Doyun taught them himself, from morning till night. He showed them how to read the land without a panel, by color, by smell, by weeds. Dark soil means wet. Light soil means dry. If it smells sour, the pH is low. If pigweed is growing, the groundwater is close. He couldn't give them his panel, but he could give them eyes, teach them to see what he saw. Lina helped. She taught them which herbs grow on sick soil, which ones on healthy soil. Yunmei forged plows and sickles for shipment. 20 sets. She worked day and night. With A, she trained militiamen from the new villages. Basic skills, formation, spear, shield. A month later, 30 people went home, with seeds, with tools, with knowledge. By fall, news came from 6 villages. 4 had cleared their fields. The rice sprouted, the pumpkins grew. The harvest wasn't like Doyun's, more modest, but it was there. People ate. 2 villages couldn't manage, too much manna in the soil, too few people. Doyun sent 10 people there with mountain sorrel and iron water. By winter, they had cleared their fields too. 7 villages. Pumpkin Ford at the center. A union. Informal, without contracts or seals. Just 7 villages fed by 1 man. People started calling him something else. Not the guy from the fields, not the legendary farmer. Lord Han. Doyun winced every time. He didn't want that word, but it stuck. That same summer, the Alchemists' Guild declared him a heretic. Doyun found out from the merchant Huang Bo Sok, who had come for a second shipment of rice. The merchant told him that a guild order was posted in the provincial capital. Han Doyun, class, farmer, accused of illegally revitalizing the land without a license from the Alchemists' Guild, of using prohibited methods to manipulate mana, of undermining the guild's monopoly on land elixirs, a fine of 100 gold pieces, or arrest. Doyun listened. Then he asked the merchant how much the guild's land elixir cost. The merchant said 200 gold per barrel, 1 barrel per field, enough for a season. Doyun nodded. His method cost 0 gold, ash and rusty iron. It was clear why the guild was nervous. He didn't react to the order. He kept working, but Unji warned him. She said the guild wouldn't stop at a piece of paper. They'd send people. Doyun nodded. He knew. He was prepared. Meanwhile, another person appeared in the village, a girl, 19 years old, slender, pale, with soft hands that had never worked. She claimed to be the daughter of a merchant from the capital. She said she wanted to work in the kitchen, so Rin assigned her to the community dining hall to peel vegetables. The girl was peeling a pumpkin and cut herself 3 times in an hour, so Rin bandaged her hands. She looked at the cuts, at the soft palms, at her posture, at the way she spoke, and said nothing. That evening, she told Doyun that the new girl wasn't the merchant's daughter, that she had hands that had never held anything heavier than a writing brush, that her posture was as straight as someone who'd been taught to walk with a book on their head, and that she was afraid of every little rustle. Doyun looked at his wife. So Rin was observant. He knew that, but he was surprised anew every time. He went to see the new girl. She was washing pots in the dining hall's backyard. Her hands were red from the hot water. Her eyes were tear-stained. He sat down beside her. He asked what her real name was. The girl froze. She turned pale. Then she turned ashen. She began to stammer that she really a merchant's daughter, that her father had sent her to study, that she was just a klutz. Doyun waited. He didn't interrupt. When she fell silent, he spoke softly. He said that in his village, it didn't matter who you were. What mattered was who you were now, and that if she needed shelter, she would get it, no questions asked. The girl looked at him. Her eyes were huge, wet. Then she said, Cho Ha-un, the king's 4th daughter. She ran away from the palace when she found out she was being married off to Duke Yunwon. She is 62 years old. 3 wives have died. Doyun listened. His expression didn't change. Then he asked what she wanted. Ha-un blinked. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. She remained silent. Then she whispered. She said she wanted to bake bread, the kind her nanny used to bake when she was a child, and that the smell of bread was the only warmth she remembered. Doyun stood up. He led her to the bakery. The fall of the second year brought an army, not bandits, not a horde, a real army. Duke Yeonwan, the very one Ha-un was destined for. He sent 1,000 soldiers under the command of General Im Cheol-su. The official reason, to restore order in the rebellious province. The real one, to bring back the runaway princess, to seize the grain, to destroy the heretical farmer. Tae saw dust 3 days in advance. He said there were many coming, very many. The earth was shaking. Doyun didn't panic. He prepared. For 3 days, day and night. So A positioned the guards on the walls, 80 men. No longer peasants with spears, 6 months of training, leather armor, wooden shields with iron edging, spears from Yun Mei. Kang Jae stood at the gate. Jong Hae Min with former bandits on the watchtowers. 4 and 2 wolves by the wall. A young griffin circled in the sky. It had appeared a month ago. It had flown in from the mountains, wounded, an arrow in its wing. Li Na had pulled the arrow out. Du Young had fed it for 3 days. On the 4th day, the griffin remained. Its wings were wider than a cart. Its beak could snap a spear in 2. And it sat on the roof of the warehouse like a giant cat, gazing at the world with yellow eyes. The army arrived on the 4th day, 1,000 strong, mounted and on foot, a forest of spears, the Duke's banners, drums. They set up camp on the plain north of the village. General Im sent a messenger, a demand. Open the gates, hand over the princess, hand over the grain, hand over the heretic Han to the guild for trial. Doyun read the demand. He placed it on the table. He looked at his people. Soa, Kang Jae, Yun Mei, Li Na, So Rin, Un Ji, Ha-un. Everyone was there. Ha-un was pale. Her lips were pressed together. She said quietly that if necessary, she would go out, so as not to endanger the village. Doyun looked at her, then at the others. So Rin stood next to Ha-un, holding her hand. So Rin, who was the first to realize that the girl wasn't who she claimed to be, and the first to accept her. Doyun said that no one was going anywhere, that he wouldn't hand over his people. Soa asked what would happen then. They couldn't stand up to 1,000 men. Doyun said they didn't need to stand up to 1,000 men. You have to make sure the 1,000 don't want to fight. He sent a messenger back, with an invitation. General Im and his officers were invited to a feast, tomorrow, noon, at Pumpkin Ford. The general accepted, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of calculation. Gathering intelligence through a feast is an old trick. But Doyun knew this. And he wasn't preparing for intelligence. He was preparing weapons. For the next 24 hours, the village didn't sleep. So Rin was in charge of the kitchen. 10 women were cooking. Fluffy, fragrant white rice, pumpkin porridge, bean stew, corn flatbreads, Ha-un bread, fresh, hot, golden. Li Na's tea made from mountain herbs, soy meat for those who don't eat regular meat. Jam made from berries Doyun had grown. Everything was ready by noon. Tables stood in the square, long ones, for 5,000 servings. Yes, for 5,000. Not for 10 officers, for the entire army. Doyun didn't invite the general. He invited 1,000 soldiers. General Im rode through the gates at noon. With 20 officers, he saw the tables. His jaw dropped. Doyun stood in the square in his work clothes. He bowed. He said the table was set, for everyone. If the general would allow his soldiers to enter. The general looked at him, then at the tables, then at the smoke from the kitchen. The smell drifted across the square, hot, hearty, rich. The general was an old soldier, 30 years in the army. He knew his men hadn't eaten a hot meal in 3 days. Rations, hardtack and water. He looked at Doyun for a long time. Then he nodded. 1,000 soldiers entered the village, in 5 columns, weapons on their backs. They sat down at the tables and ate, silently, hungrily. Rice, bread, porridge, stew, flatbreads, tea, 5,000 servings. So Rin directed the distribution like a military commander. Not a single empty bowl, not a single soldier left out. Every soldier got a full serving, the same for everyone, just like her own men. The feast lasted 3 hours. When the last bowl was empty, General Im sat at the table and said nothing. His officers sat beside him. Everyone was silent. Doyun sat across from him. He spoke, quietly, as if in a council. He said he knew why the army had come, for the princess, for the grain, for his head, and that the general could take it all. 1,000 swords against 80 spears. The math was simple, but he suggested they think it over. There were 300 people in this village, 8 fields, a mill, a bakery, a smithy, a union of 7 villages, 3,000 people who were eating for the first time in 10 years. If the general destroyed all this, those 3,000 would go hungry again, and hungry people become bandits. And bandits are the army's problem, a vicious circle. But if the general leaves as an ally, then Pumpkin Ford will feed his garrisons, 50 sacks per season, at a price below market value. And the Duke will get not a runaway princess, but a trade agreement worth more than any bride. The general listened. His face remained impassive. 30 years in the army had taught him not to show his thoughts. But Doyun saw his hands. They lay on the table, relaxed. A man who is about to attack does not relax his hands. The general asked one thing. He asked how a farmer without a sword could feed 1,000 foreign soldiers and not be afraid. Doyun answered. He said he was afraid. But that fear was no reason not to feed the hungry. The general was silent. Then he stood up. He bowed, briefly, in a military manner, and led his army out of the village. A week later, a messenger arrived from the Yun. A trade agreement, 50 sacks per season. In exchange, protection from the Alchemists' Guild and official status as a free settlement. Haun was not mentioned in the agreement. The Duke had found another bride. Doyun held the scroll bearing the Duke's seal. He looked at it. Then he handed it to Unji. For the archives. Unji accepted it. She ran her fingers over the seal. She looked at him through her glasses and said quietly that he was doing the impossible. Doyun shook his head. He said it wasn't impossible. The 3rd year began in silence. For the first time in 2 years, no one came with a sword, no bandits, no horde, no army. Pumpkin Ford stood behind its walls and breathed. 800 souls, 40 villages in the alliance, 2 cities trading grain, 150,000 people eating, thanks to the seeds and knowledge that came from a single village. Doyun stood on the hill above the first field. That very one, the barren patch beyond the outskirts. Now it was golden. The ears of grain stood like a solid wall, the 8th harvest from this land. He placed his palm on the ground. The panel lit up. pH 6.8, neutral, healthy. Dead mana, 0. Nitrogen, normal. Phosphorus, normal. Potassium, normal. Perfect soil. He removed his hand. He looked at his class panel. Level 7. The experience bar was almost full. The list of abilities was long. But he was looking at a single line. Name on the grain. Ultimate ability. Grow a variety tailored to a specific person. The price. A year of life for each name. He had already used it 3 times. The first time for Sorin, quietly, at night, back in the winter. He planted a small field under her window. Special rice, just for her. Rice that restores what was broken inside her. Infertility, a topic they didn't discuss. One the neighbors whispered about. One that made So-Rin cringe every month as if struck. He didn't tell her who the rice was for. He just planted it, watered it, tended to it. So-Rin noticed the small field by the house. She asked what it was. He said it was an experimental variety.
She didn't ask any further, but when the rice ripened, she cooked it every day, without knowing why. She just wanted to. 2 months later, Li Na came to see her for a checkup, a routine one, a monthly one. Li Na checked on all the women in the village. Routine. She placed her hands on So Rin's belly, froze, looked up. So Rin was looking at her. Li Na spoke slowly. She said that So Rin needed to rest more and eat for two. So Rin didn't understand. Then she did. Her eyes grew huge. She pressed her hands to her belly. She looked at the small field outside the window, at the rice that grew just for her, and she understood everything. She didn't come to him during the day. She didn't say anything in front of others. At night, she lay beside him. He could feel she wasn't sleeping. Then she took his hand, placed it on her stomach, and whispered, "Thank you." He didn't answer. He just lay there with his hand on her stomach and stared into the darkness, and thought that a year of life was a small price to pay. The second time he used the name on the grain was for the old woman Bon Sun. Her eyes were failing, cataracts. Li Na couldn't help her. Doyun grew a pumpkin, one, a small one, for Bon Sun. The old woman ate pumpkin porridge for a week. Then she said she could see better, that faces had become clearer, that she could distinguish the leaves on a tree. She cried, quietly, like an old woman, wiping her eyes with the corner of her handkerchief. The second year of her life was gone. Doyun hadn't counted. The third time for Li Na. He hadn't planned it. It happened. Li Na fell ill. Autumn fever. The very same one that had killed her sister. An irony that Doyun hadn't appreciated. Li Na lay in her doctor's hut, pale, with sores in her mouth, with flaking skin, the same symptoms, pellagra. For 10 years she had treated others and forgotten to eat herself. 10 years on herbs and water. Her body gave out. Doyun grew corn, one patch, overnight. The panel showed name on grain activated, price accepted. He cooked porridge from that corn, brought it to Li Na, fed her with a spoon. She was too weak to resist. On the third day she got up. On the fifth she went to work. On the seventh she came to him, stood in the doorway, silently. Then she said she knew that the porridge he'd fed her wasn't ordinary, that she was a herbalist and could tell the difference, that there was something in that corn that didn't exist in nature, something made for her, personally. Doyun didn't deny it. Li Na stood there. Then she stepped toward him. She rested her forehead against his chest. She stood like that. She didn't hug him. She just stood there and breathed, evenly, deeply, like a person who had finally stopped carrying something heavy. 3 years of life. Doyun knew. Unji knew. No one else. Unji came to him after the third time. She said he had to stop, that the scrolls spoke of a price, that every year took not just time, but strength, health, youth, that he was aging faster than he should. Doyun looked at his hands. Wrinkles. He was 27. Hands like a 40-year-old's. He nodded, said he would stop. Unji looked at him. She knew he was lying, but she said nothing, because what lay ahead was the most important thing, lifting the curse, the great drought, dead mana that lay beneath the southern lands for hundreds of miles, 3 centuries of scorched earth. Doyun had been preparing all winter. Unji had deciphered the last scroll, a ritual, not magical, agricultural. They needed to grow a single crop, one, but not for humans, for the earth. A name on a grain for an entire continent. Rice, whose roots would pierce the layer of mana across the entire south, whose grains would feed on the poison and transform it into life. One sowing, one harvest, and the curse would be lifted. The price. Unji read, squinting. Then she took off her glasses, rubbed her eyes, put them back on, read it again, looked at him. She said quietly, 3 years. 3 years of life, plus the 3 he had already given up. 6. He would live 6 years less. Doyun was silent. Then he asked how much time he had left. Unji calculated. The old Doyun had been healthy. He could have lived to 70. Minus 6. 64. Doyun nodded. 64. 64. He could live with that.
He went out to the field in the spring of the 3rd year, alone. At dawn, he stood in the first field, the very one where it all began. He sank his hands into the earth. He closed his eyes and activated the name on the grain. Not for a human, for the earth. The world shuddered. He felt it. The earth beneath his hands grew hot, then cold, then hot again, like a pulse. The panel flashed white, not green, not yellow, white. Letters formed into lines. The name on the seed, the target, the Sager continent, the southern lands. Area of effect, 400 miles. Price accepted. He felt something leaving him. Not pain, not weakness, time. As if someone had fast-forwarded 3 years and cut them out. 3 years that would never be. 3 dawns in the field he would never see. 3 harvests that would be gathered without him. 3 nights beside Sorin that would never happen. He opened his eyes. The world was the same. The sun, the field, the wind, but in his hands lay seeds, a handful, white, glowing, warm, seeds of the last order. He planted them, one by one, into the soil of the first field, and he waited. Sprouts appeared by evening, not green, golden. They glowed in the twilight, with a quiet, soft light, like little lamps in the earth. People came out of their houses. They stood and watched. So-Rin stood beside him, holding his hand. She saw that he had changed, that there were more wrinkles around his eyes, that his shoulders had slumped slightly, that a white strand had flashed in his hair. She said nothing. She just squeezed his hand tighter. The golden shoots were growing, higher every day, brighter every day. And every day the earth around them changed. The manna was fading, not from just one field, from the entire region, as if golden roots stretched underground for miles, for tens of miles, hundreds. They said the wind had changed, that it smelled different, fresh, like after rain, but there had been no rain. A month later, the golden rice ripened. The ears stood heavy, glowing. Doyun squeezed one. The grains were warm, alive, pulsing. He looked at the panel. Dead manna in the southern lands. It was 100%. It became 0. The curse was lifted. 300 years over. He stood in the field and looked at the number, 0, and laughed, quietly, with teary eyes. In the evening, there was a feast, the first real feast. Not for trade, not for diplomacy, for joy. Long tables in the square, 300 people, rice, pumpkin, beans. Hayun's golden bread with a crispy crust, soy flatbreads, stewed vegetables according to Altan's recipe. Li Na's tea, So-Rin's jam. Tae played the flute. He wasn't alone. A boy from the nomads sat nearby with a drum made of goatskin. Bon Sun sang. Altan sang along. 2 voices, 2 languages, 1 song. Children ran between the tables, full, laughing, with round cheeks and clear eyes. Not the children with swollen bellies he had seen on the first day. Others, alive. So Ah sat in the corner, with a bowl of soy flatbreads. She ate slowly. Her eyes were not dead, not yet alive, but no longer empty. Something warm flickered at the bottom, like embers under ash. Yun Mei sat on the threshold of the smithy, with a hammer at her feet, with rice in her hand, chewing, looking at the square, at the people, at the lights, at the laughing children. Her face was calm. Her hands were covered in soot. Her ears were red. Because Du Yun, passing by, had told her that without her hands, none of this would have happened. Yun Ji sat by the lamp with a scroll, glasses on her nose. But she wasn't reading. She looked past the pages, at the square, at the people, at the living history she had studied for 12 years through dead texts. Li Na stood by the kitchen, with a cup of tea. She looked at Du Yun, at the white strand in his hair, at the wrinkles around his eyes that hadn't been there a year ago. She knew he had paid. She didn't know how much, but she knew he had paid. And she silently promised herself she would stay by his side, so that what he had bought at that price wouldn't be wasted. Ha-Un stood by the oven, baking, her face red from the heat, flour in her hair, hands in the dough. She was smiling, Every loaf of bread she took out of the oven was for someone. This one is for the elder, because he likes it with a crispy crust. This one is for Tay, because he likes it soft. This one is for Bon Sun, because it's hard for her to chew and she needs it fluffy. Every loaf is meant for someone specific. Just like everything Doyun did, she learned from him without even knowing it. Doyun stood up. He raised a bowl. The square fell silent. 300 people were watching him. He stood in the center, in work clothes, in dirty boots, with a white strand of hair, with wrinkles, with calluses on his hands, with dirt under his fingernails. He spoke briefly. "This isn't my food, it's ours. Thank you for trusting the farmer." Silence. A second, two. Then Elder Park Jung-soo stood up, slowly, groaning. He bowed. Behind him, Bon Sun stood up. She bowed. Behind her, Tae, Cho Dae-ho, you me with the child. The Park brothers, Kang Jae, Jong Hae-min, Alton, one after another, all 300. They stood and bowed to the farmer in dirty boots. So Rin stood nearby. She didn't bow. She looked at him, at his face, at his eyes, at the white strand, and she smiled, quietly, like someone who knows what the others don't. That this man had given years of his life for the people at this table, and that he would do it again if he had to. A panel flashed above his head. Doyun looked up. Golden letters, just like on the first day, only different. The legend is complete. The class has been updated. Father of the Earth. The letters glowed above his head, golden, bright, visible to all. The people froze. They looked up, they read, and they were silent. Because there were no words. There were only letters in the sky and a man below, with dirt under his fingernails and rice on the table. Doyun lowered his eyes. He looked at So-rin, at her belly beneath her loose shirt, at her dark eyes. He reached out his hand. She took it. He led her away from the square, quietly, past the tables, past the people, past the lights, toward home, toward the small field beneath the window. The rice there stood golden, ready for harvest, her rice, for her. They stood by the field, the two of them, in silence. The wind carried the scent of pumpkin and bread. Tae played the flute. The stars lit up one by one, and the earth beneath their feet was warm, alive, healthy, for the first time in 300 years.